Rachel Hart's wedding should have been perfect until mafia boss Luca Valenti crashed through the garden gates with a truth that shattered everything. The baby she's carrying isn't her fiancé's, it's his. Stolen DNA. A pregnancy engineered by enemies who've been hunting her for weeks. Before she can scream, gunfire erupts. Luca doesn't ask permission. He throws her into an armored SUV and speeds away from the only life she's ever known. Now she's trapped in a gilded cage with a dangerous man who claims he's saving her life. But from what? And at what cost? If you're ready for a story about secret survival and a love born from chaos, stay with me until the end. Hit that like button and comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels across the world. The afternoon sun caught the lace of Rachel Hart's wedding dress just right, turning the delicate fabric into something that looked almost celestial against the manicured gardens of the Fairmont Copley Plaza. She stood before the mirror in the bridal suite, her reflection staring back with dark eyes that should have sparkled with joy, but instead held something closer to resignation. 29 years old, doctor of veterinary medicine, about to marry a man who made her feel safe but never made her feel alive. "You look beautiful," her sister Emily said from the doorway, champagne flute in hand, though her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. Emily had always been able to read Rachel like an open book, and right now that book was screaming uncertainty in every chapter. Rachel smoothed her hands over the dress, feeling the slight swell of her abdomen that no one else could detect yet. 8 weeks. 8 weeks of carrying a secret that felt like a stone in her chest, every time Derek Hale looked at her with those calm, measured eyes that never showed much of anything at all. "Do you love him?" Emily asked quietly, stepping into the room and closing the door. The question hung in the air like smoke. Rachel wanted to say yes. She wanted to believe that the stability Derek offered, the predictable future, the comfortable partnership, was enough. But love, the wild, consuming kind that made people do reckless things, that had never been part of their equation. "I respect him," Rachel said finally. "I trust him. That's more than a lot of people have." Emily's expression softened with something that looked like pity. "That's not what I asked." Before Rachel could answer, a knock interrupted them. Derek's mother, Margaret Hale, entered with the kind of commanding presence that made even spacious rooms feel smaller. She was all Boston Brahmin elegance, pearl necklace, perfectly coiffed silver hair, and a smile that was more about social propriety than genuine warmth. "Rachel, darling, we're ready to begin. The guests are seated." Margaret's gaze swept over her future daughter-in-law with an appraising eye. "You look lovely. Derek is very fortunate." Fortunate. Not lucky. Not blessed. Fortunate. As if Rachel were a good investment, a sound decision, a merger of compatible assets. Rachel forced a smile. "Thank you, Margaret." As Margaret swept back out, Emily squeezed Rachel's hand. "It's not too late," she whispered. "You could still—" "I'm pregnant," Rachel said, the words escaping before she could stop them. Emily's eyes went wide. "What? Oh my God, Rachel, when did—" "The fertility clinic. Derek's idea. He has a genetic condition he didn't want to pass on naturally, so we used a procedure. I found out 2 weeks ago." Rachel's voice dropped to barely a whisper. "I haven't told him yet." "Jesus, Rachel, you're marrying him and you haven't—" I know. I needed to get through today first. One thing at a time." Emily looked like she wanted to say more, but the string quartet outside began playing the processional music. The moment had arrived. Rachel took a deep breath, picked up her bouquet of white roses and eucalyptus, and stepped toward a future that felt more like a carefully constructed facade than a genuine beginning. The garden ceremony was everything Derek's mother had orchestrated. Elegant, refined, and precisely choreographed. 200 guests sat in neat rows of white chairs, most of them Derek's colleagues from his financial consulting firm or Margaret's society friends. Rachel's side was smaller, her veterinary practice partners, a few college friends, family scattered throughout the rows. Derek stood at the altar in his immaculate tuxedo, hands clasped in front of him, expression pleasant but unremarkable. He looked at Rachel the same way he looked at quarterly reports, with careful assessment and measured satisfaction. Rachel walked down the aisle on her father's arm, her smile fixed in place, her heart beating with something that felt more like dread than anticipation. This was supposed to be the happiest day of her life. Why did it feel like she was walking toward the edge of a cliff? The officiant began the ceremony with traditional words about love and commitment, partnership and devotion. Rachel heard herself responding at the appropriate moments, watched Derek slip the engagement ring off, and prepare to replace it with the wedding band, felt the weight of 200 pairs of eyes watching this supposedly sacred moment. Then the engines roared. At first, Rachel thought it was traffic from the street beyond the garden walls. Boston was always noisy. But the sound grew louder, more aggressive, multiple vehicles moving fast and getting closer. Guests began turning in their seats, murmuring confusion. Derek frowned, his composure cracking slightly. The garden gates, ornate wrought iron that had been closed for the private ceremony, suddenly exploded inward with a screech of metal and shattering stone. 3 black SUVs crashed through like battering rams, tires churning up the perfect lawn, heading straight for the ceremony space. Screams erupted. Guests scattered. Derek grabbed Rachel's arm, trying to pull her toward the side exit, but she stood frozen, her mind unable to process what was happening. The lead SUV screeched to a halt 15 feet from the altar. The back door opened and a man stepped out. He was tall, easily 6'3", with broad shoulders filling out a perfectly tailored black suit. Dark hair, sharp features, and eyes that scanned the chaos with the kind of cold calculation that sent ice down Rachel's spine. He moved with absolute confidence, like someone who had crashed weddings before and knew exactly how it would end. Behind him, men in tactical gear emerged from the other vehicles, forming a disciplined perimeter. They didn't point weapons at anyone, but their presence alone was enough to freeze the remaining guests in place. The man in the black suit walked straight toward Rachel. Derek stepped in front of her, his face flushed with anger and fear. "What the hell do you think you're—" The man didn't even look at him. "Step aside. This is a private ceremony. You need to leave immediately before I call." "I said step aside." The voice was low, controlled, but carried the kind of authority that made it clear this wasn't a request. Derek didn't move. The man's hand shot out, gripping Derek's shoulder and physically moving him with the kind of strength that made it look effortless. Derek stumbled back, shock replacing his indignation. Then the man stood in front of Rachel, and she got her first real look at his face. He was younger than she'd initially thought, maybe 35, with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow and eyes the color of cold steel. There was something familiar in his features, something that tugged at the edges of her memory, but she couldn't place it. "Dr. Rachel Hart," he said, and his voice was quieter now, almost gentle, though no less intense. "Who are you?" Rachel managed to ask, her voice shaking. "Luca Valenti." He said the name like it should mean something to her. When she didn't react, something flickered in his eyes, surprise maybe, or frustration. "You really don't know, do you?" "Know what? What is this? What do you want?" Luca's jaw tightened. "The baby you're carrying, it's mine." The words hit Rachel like a physical blow. She actually stumbled back a step, her hand instinctively moving to her abdomen. That's insane. I don't even know you. I've never... Boston fertility specialist. 8 weeks ago, you underwent an IVF procedure. Luca's voice was matter-of-fact, reciting information that should have been private. Your fiancé's genetic material was supposed to be used. It wasn't. Rachel's blood went cold. How do you can't possibly... Derek pushed forward again, his face red. "This is harassment. Security!" But the hotel security wasn't coming. Rachel realized with growing horror that Luca's men had likely secured every entrance, every exit. This wasn't random chaos. This was planned, precise, executed with military efficiency. "The genetic material used in your procedure was stolen from me," Luca continued, his eyes never leaving Rachel's face. "You've been carrying my child for 8 weeks, and you've been in danger for at least 3 of them." "Danger?" Rachel's voice came out as a whisper. "What are you talking about?" Luca opened his mouth to answer, and that's when the first shot rang out. The bullet hit the fountain behind the altar, sending up a spray of water and stone fragments. Guests who had been frozen in shock now erupted into full panic, screaming and running in every direction. Luca moved like lightning, grabbing Rachel and pulling her down behind the overturned chairs as more gunfire erupted from the tree line beyond the garden. Rachel couldn't breathe, couldn't think. The world had become chaos, screaming, gunfire, the smell of gunpowder mixing with crushed flowers. Luca's body covered hers, one arm wrapped around her protectively, while his other hand produced a weapon from inside his jacket. "Stay down," he ordered, then barked something in Italian to his men. They moved with practiced precision, returning fire toward the trees, creating a protective corridor. I need to. Rachel tried to push up, to see if Emily was safe, if her father had gotten out, but Luca held her firm. "Don't move. They're targeting you." "Who? Who's targeting me?" "The same people who orchestrated this entire thing, the pregnancy, the stolen genetic material. They've been watching you for weeks, waiting for the right moment." Luca's voice was calm despite the bullets flying around them. "I'm getting you out of here. Now." He pulled her to her feet in one smooth motion and started moving toward his SUV, his body positioned between her and the shooters. Rachel's dress caught on something, tearing, but she didn't care. Nothing made sense. Nothing was real. This morning she'd been worried about wedding vows, and now people were shooting at her. They reached the SUV. Luca opened the back door and practically threw her inside, following immediately and slamming the door behind them. "Drive!" he shouted to the man behind the wheel. The vehicle lurched forward, tires screaming as they tore across the ruined garden and through what remained of the gates. Rachel twisted around to look out the back window and saw Derek standing in the middle of the chaos, staring after her with an expression she couldn't read. Then they were on the street, weaving through Boston traffic at terrifying speeds, and the hotel disappeared behind them. Rachel's hands were shaking, her whole body was shaking. "You just kidnapped me. You crashed my wedding and kidnapped me." "I saved your life," Luca corrected, holstering his weapon. "Those shooters would have taken you regardless. At least my way, you're still breathing." "This is insane. Let me out. Let me out right now." "Can't do that. You can't just. This is illegal. This is Dr. Hart." Luca turned to face her fully, and the intensity in his eyes made her fall silent. "I understand this is overwhelming. I understand you're frightened and confused, but in about 30 seconds, you're going to need to make a choice. Trust that I'm telling you the truth and let me protect you, or fight me and make yourself an easier target for the people who want you dead." "Why would anyone want me dead? I'm a veterinarian. I treat sick animals. I'm not involved in anything." "You became involved the moment they decided to use you as a weapon against me." Luca's expression was grim. "Your pregnancy isn't an accident, Rachel. It's a carefully constructed trap designed to force my hand. And if I don't protect you, they'll take you, extract my child, and eliminate you as a loose end." Rachel felt bile rise in her throat. "Extract? You mean—" "I mean exactly what you think I mean." Luca's voice softened slightly. "I'm not going to let that happen, but I need you to work with me, not against me." The SUV made a sharp turn, throwing Rachel against the door. She gripped the handle, her mind racing through impossible possibilities. This had to be a nightmare, a stress-induced hallucination. She would wake up in the bridal suite, and this would all be some anxiety dream about cold feet and commitment fears. But the leather seat beneath her was too real. The adrenaline coursing through her veins was too intense. The sound of Luca's breathing beside her was too immediate. "Who are you?" she asked again, quieter this time. "Really? Who are you?" Luca studied her for a long moment. "I'm someone a lot of people fear. Someone with enemies who would use any leverage against me. And you," he gestured toward her abdomen, "you're carrying the most powerful leverage that exists." "The mafia," Rachel's voice was flat. "You're with the mafia. I run a significant organization in the Northeast, yes. And you're telling me that someone stole your genetic material and used it to impregnate me without my knowledge or consent as part of some plan to, what, control you? To force me to surrender territory, to weaken my position, to make me vulnerable?" Luca's jaw clenched. "And it's working." Rachel pressed her hand against her stomach, feeling the slight swell that she'd thought represented a future with Derek. Safe, boring, predictable Derek who would never crash a wedding or speak about enemies and territory and violence. "I want proof," she said. "I want medical proof that what you're saying is true. You'll have it. I have a doctor at the estate who can run whatever tests you need. Estate? You're taking me to some kind of, what, a compound? A secure location where those shooters can't reach you. Yes. I didn't agree to this. I didn't agree to any of this. Luca's expression was unreadable. I know, and I'm sorry for that, but agreement isn't a luxury we have right now. Survival is what matters. The SUV pulled onto a private road, trees closing in on either side. Rachel realized they'd left the city behind entirely. They were heading into the suburbs, maybe beyond, every mile taking her further from the life she knew. My family, she said suddenly. My sister was at the wedding. My father. If those people were shooting, my men got them out. They're safe. Shaken, but safe. Luca pulled out his phone, scrolled for a moment, then showed her a photo. Emily and their father sitting in what looked like a hotel room, both clearly upset but unharmed. I have people watching them. They won't be touched. Rachel stared at the photo, relief washing through her so intensely she felt dizzy. I need to talk to them. I need to tell them I'm okay. Not yet. Any communication could be traced. Give me 48 hours to secure the situation, then we'll arrange something safe. 48 hours? Rachel's voice rose. You expect me to just disappear for 2 days while my entire family thinks I've been kidnapped by... She stopped. I have been kidnapped. By you. Protected. Not kidnapped. But you literally threw me in a car without my consent and drove me away from my own wedding. That's the definition of kidnapping. Luca had the grace to look slightly uncomfortable. The semantics can be debated later. Right now, we focus on keeping you alive. The SUV turned through a gate that was far more substantial than the hotel's ornamental iron. This was serious security. 12-foot walls topped with cameras and sensors. They drove up a long driveway lined with mature trees that eventually opened to reveal a sprawling estate that looked like something from a different century. The mansion was beautiful, classic New England architecture with modern security additions that tried to blend in but were obvious once you knew what to look for. Manicured grounds, a view of distant water, the kind of place that cost millions and probably had a violent history. Rachel felt her heart sink as the SUV stopped in front of the main entrance. This was real. This was happening. This morning she'd been Dr. Rachel Hart, veterinarian, about to make a safe choice and marry a safe man. Now she was, what? A prisoner? A protected asset? The unwitting mother of a mafia boss's stolen child? Luca exited the vehicle and extended his hand to help her out. Rachel ignored it, gathering her torn wedding dress and climbing out on her own. The lace dragged on the gravel driveway. Her white heels were ruined. Her carefully styled hair was falling out of its pins. She looked like exactly what she was, a bride who'd been ripped from her own ceremony and thrust into a nightmare. This way, Luca said, gesturing toward the entrance. And if I refuse, then you stand here in your wedding dress while I have my men explain the security protocols. But it's going to take at least 20 minutes, and you look exhausted. He was right, she realized. The adrenaline was wearing off, leaving behind a bone-deep fatigue that made her legs feel like water. She was exhausted and terrified, and so far beyond her depth that she couldn't even see the surface anymore. Rachel followed him inside. The interior was as impressive as the exterior. High ceilings, original moldings, artwork that was probably worth more than her entire veterinary practice. But it was also clearly fortified. She noticed the reinforced doors, the security panels, the discreet cameras in every corner. A woman appeared from a side hallway, mid-50s, professional bearing, kind eyes. Dr. Hart, I'm Elena. I manage the household. Your room is ready whenever you'd like to rest. I've also prepared some clothes in your size. The dress is beautiful, but probably not comfortable for long-term wear. Rachel looked down at the torn lace and crushed flowers still pinned to her bodice. No, not comfortable. Elena will take care of you, Luca said. I need to handle some calls. We'll talk more in a few hours, once you've had time to process. Process? Rachel's laugh came out slightly hysterical. You think a few hours is going to help me process that my entire life just imploded? Luca's expression softened. No, but it might help you catch your breath before we discuss the next steps. He disappeared down another hallway, leaving Rachel alone with Elena, who smiled gently. Come with me, dear. Let's get you out of that dress and into something more practical. Then perhaps some tea? Rachel followed numbly, her mind still trying to catch up with everything that had happened in the last hour. The wedding, the crash, the gunfire, Luca Valenti's impossible claims about stolen genetic material and enemies and danger. The baby. Her hand moved to her stomach again as Elena led her upstairs to a bedroom that was larger than Rachel's entire apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the grounds. A king-sized bed with luxurious linens. An ensuite bathroom with a soaking tub. A beautiful prison. The clothes are in the closet, Elena said. All new, all your size. Mr. Valenti was very specific about ensuring your comfort. If you need anything at all, there's an intercom by the bed. Press the button and someone will respond immediately. Someone? You mean guards? Elena's smile didn't waver. Staff. But yes, the property is well protected. For your safety. Right. My safety. Rachel sank onto the edge of the bed, suddenly too tired to stand. Can I ask you something? Of course. Do you know what's going on? Why I'm here? Elena's expression grew more serious. I know that Mr. Valenti doesn't make decisions lightly. If he brought you here, if he's protecting you, then the threat is real and the danger is significant. He's not someone who overreacts. He crashed my wedding. Then your wedding was already compromised. Elena moved toward the door. Rest, Dr. Hart. Things will be clearer after you've slept. But sleep seemed impossible. Rachel sat on the bed long after Elena left, staring at her reflection in the mirror across the room. She still wore the wedding dress, or what remained of it. Her makeup was smudged, her hair was a disaster. She looked like a ghost of the woman who'd stood in the bridal suite that morning, worried about whether she loved Derek enough to marry him. That question seemed almost laughable now. Rachel stood and moved to the window, looking out at the manicured grounds and the wall beyond. Somewhere out there, her family was trying to make sense of what happened. Derek was probably with his lawyers demanding action. The police were likely searching for her. And she was here, in a mansion owned by a man who claimed to be the father of her child through a violation so profound she couldn't fully process it yet. Her phone was gone, left behind at the hotel or confiscated during the chaos. No way to contact anyone. No way to verify anything Luca had said. She needed proof, medical proof, scientific proof that this insane story had any basis in reality. Rachel changed out of the dress, finding comfortable clothes in the closet exactly as Elena had promised. Jeans that fit perfectly, soft sweaters, even shoes in her exact size. The level of preparation was unsettling. How long had Luca been planning this? How much did he know about her? She found the intercom and pressed the button. A male voice responded immediately. Yes, Dr. Hart? I need to speak with Luca Valenti, now. Mr. Valenti is in a meeting. He asked not to be disturbed. I don't care what he asked. Tell him I want medical proof of his claims and I want it tonight. If he can't provide that, then he can explain to whatever authorities are looking for me why he's holding me against my will. There was a pause. I'll relay your message. 10 minutes later, a knock on the door. Rachel opened it to find Luca standing there, his jacket removed, sleeves rolled up, looking like he'd been in intense discussions. Behind him stood a woman in her 60s carrying a medical bag. This is Dr. Sarah Chen, Luca said. She's a geneticist I've worked with before. She'll run whatever tests you need to verify what I've told you. Dr. Chen stepped forward with a professional smile. Dr. Hart, I understand this situation is extremely distressing. I'm here to provide you with factual, verifiable information. Would you prefer to speak privately, or is Mr. Valenti's presence acceptable? Rachel looked at Luca, who met her gaze steadily. He can stay. I want him to hear whatever you tell me. Dr. Chen nodded and set up her equipment on the desk. I'll need a blood sample from you and a comparative genetic sample from Mr. Valenti. The results will take a few hours, but I can provide preliminary findings fairly quickly. The process was quick and professional, Doctor. Chen drew blood from Rachel's arm, then took a cheek swab from Luca. She worked with the efficiency of someone who'd done this countless times, her expression neutral and focused. The embryonic DNA is already present in your bloodstream, Dr. Chen explained as she prepared the samples. I can identify the paternal markers and compare them to Mr. Valenti's genetic profile. If there's a match, we'll know definitively. And if there's not, Rachel asked, then Mr. Valenti's information is incorrect, and we'll need to investigate further. Dr. Chen looked up. But I should tell you, Dr. Hart, that I've already reviewed the medical records from Boston fertility specialists. The documentation shows clear irregularities in your procedure. Rachel's stomach dropped. What kind of irregularities? The genetic material logged for your IVF doesn't match the standard protocols. There are discrepancies in the chain of custody, unusual staff assignments that day, and several security gaps that shouldn't exist in a legitimate facility. Dr. Chen's expression was sympathetic. Someone went to significant effort to ensure the wrong genetic material was used in your procedure. The words hung in the air like poison. Rachel felt the room tilt slightly, her grip tightening on the chair's armrest. You're saying someone deliberately... I'm saying the evidence suggests intentional manipulation, yes. Luca moved closer, his voice quiet. The fertility clinic has connections to an Albanian organization I've been at odds with for years. They saw an opportunity and exploited it. Derek Hale's genetic screening gave them cover. Your desire for a child gave them access, and my genetic material gave them leverage. But how did they get your... Rachel stopped, not sure she wanted to know the answer. A medical appointment 2 years ago, routine physical. The sample was supposed to be destroyed after testing. It wasn't. Luca's jaw clenched. They've been planning this for a long time. Dr. Chen worked quietly while they talked, running her preliminary tests. The silence stretched between them, heavy with implications neither wanted to fully acknowledge yet. Finally, Dr. Chen looked up from her equipment. The preliminary results show a 99.7% probability of paternal match between Mr. Valenti and the developing fetus. I'll run complete sequencing overnight for absolute confirmation, but based on these markers, she glanced between them, Mr. Valenti is almost certainly the biological father of your child. The words landed like stones. Rachel heard them, understood them on an intellectual level, but couldn't quite connect them to her reality. This baby, this tiny cluster of cells growing inside her, belonged to a man she'd met 3 hours ago. A criminal. A stranger. Someone who existed in a world so far from hers, they might as well be different species. I need to be alone, Rachel whispered. Luca nodded. Dr. Chen will leave her contact information. If you have questions overnight, you can reach her directly. They left, closing the door quietly behind them. Rachel stood in the center of the beautiful bedroom, her hands pressed against her stomach, and finally let herself cry. She cried for the wedding that had been destroyed, for the future that had been stolen, for the violation of her body, her choice, her autonomy, for the impossibility of the situation and the terrifying reality that Luca Valenti had been telling the truth. Someone had engineered her pregnancy as a weapon. Someone had been watching her, planning around her, using her without her knowledge or consent, and now that someone was trying to kill her. The tears eventually stopped, leaving behind a hollow exhaustion. Rachel washed her face, changed into the soft pajamas Elena had provided, and climbed into the enormous bed. Sleep should have been impossible, but her body had other ideas. Within minutes, she drifted into unconsciousness. She dreamed of gunfire and torn lace, of steel-gray eyes and the sound of engines roaring through garden gates. When she woke, dawn light was streaming through the windows. For a moment, she thought it had all been a nightmare. Then she saw the wedding dress draped over the chair, torn and stained, and reality came crashing back. Rachel sat up slowly, her hand moving to her stomach in what was becoming an automatic gesture. "Good morning, baby," she whispered. "I guess we're in this together now." A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Elena entered with a breakfast tray. "Mr. Valenti asked me to bring this up. He thought you might not want to come downstairs yet." That was considerate of him. Rachel eyed the coffee pot on the tray. "Is that decaf?" Mr. Valenti was very specific. No caffeine, nothing that might be problematic for the pregnancy. Dr. Chen provided a full list of dietary guidelines. Of course she did. Rachel accepted the tray, suddenly ravenous despite everything. "Where is he, Luca?" "In his office. He's been up all night making arrangements." "What kind of arrangements?" Elena's expression suggested she'd said too much already. "You'll need to ask him directly. Eat first. You need your strength." She left Rachel alone with toast, eggs, fresh fruit, and decaf coffee that tasted better than it had any right to. Rachel ate mechanically, her mind already moving past shock towards something more practical. She needed information. She needed to understand exactly what threat she faced, who these Albanian enemies were, and what Luca's plan actually entailed. She needed to reclaim some sense of control in a situation designed to make her powerless. And she needed to talk to her family. Rachel finished eating, showered, and dressed in the clothes provided. Simple jeans and a sweater that felt like armor against the uncertain day ahead. Then she took a deep breath, left the bedroom, and went to find Luca Valenti. The mansion was easier to navigate than she'd expected. Staff moved quietly through the hallways, nodding respectfully as she passed. No one stopped her. No one questioned her movements. It felt less like a prison than she'd anticipated, though the security presence was unmistakable. She found Luca's office on the first floor, the door partially open. He sat behind a massive desk covered in papers and computer screens, talking rapidly in Italian to someone on speakerphone. When he saw Rachel in the doorway, he raised one finger, 1 minute, and concluded the call. "You slept," he observed, gesturing for her to enter. "That's good. You needed it." "I need a lot of things. Sleep was just the most achievable." Rachel sat in the chair across from his desk, meeting his gaze directly. "I want to talk to my family. Today. I've arranged a secure video call for this afternoon. Your sister and father, no one else, because each additional person increases the risk of the call being traced." "Traced by whom? These Albanian enemies you keep mentioning?" "The Kurti organization, led by a man named Arben Kurti, who's been trying to expand into my territory for 5 years. He's smart, patient, and willing to cross lines most people won't." Luca pulled up a file on his computer and turned the screen toward her. "This is him." Rachel studied the photo of a man in his 50s with cold eyes and a pleasant smile. He looked like someone's uncle, not a criminal mastermind. "And you're sure he's behind this?" "The fertility clinic is owned by a shell corporation that traces back to one of his legitimate businesses. The shooters at your wedding were identified as Kurti soldiers, and I received a message this morning confirming his involvement." Luca's voice was flat, controlled. "He wants me to surrender 3 major operations and withdraw from the waterfront completely. In exchange, he'll ensure your safety." Meaning he'll take you into his protection, deliver the baby, and most likely eliminate you afterward as a loose end. Luca's eyes were hard. "I've seen how Kurti handles leverage once he's extracted its value. He doesn't leave witnesses." Rachel felt cold. "So my choices are to be held by you or taken by him?" "Your choice is to stay alive long enough for me to dismantle his organization and neutralize the threat permanently. Then you can make whatever decisions you want about your future." "How long will that take?" "Weeks, maybe a month if we're efficient." "And in the meantime, I'm supposed to what? Sit in this mansion and wait for you to wage war on my behalf?" Luca leaned back in his chair, studying her. "You're a veterinarian. You treat sick animals, perform surgeries, run a practice. You're not helpless or passive. I'm not asking you to be either. I'm asking you to be smart and stay protected while I handle the aspects of this situation that require my particular skill set." "Your particular skill set being violence?" "Among other things, yes." Rachel stood, pacing the office. The walls were lined with books, surprisingly literary choices mixed with business texts and what looked like philosophy. Not what she'd expected from a mafia boss, though she was rapidly learning that her expectations were useless here. "I need purpose," she said finally. "I can't just sit around waiting. I'll lose my mind." "What do you suggest?" "My practice. I have patients, appointments, surgeries scheduled. I need to stay connected to that work, even remotely." Luca considered this. "I can have your office manager redirect your appointments. The practice has other vets who can cover, correct?" "Yes, and for consultations, we can set up secure video calls. You can review cases, provide guidance, maintain your connection to the work." He pulled up another screen. "I'll have my tech team establish the infrastructure today." Rachel stopped pacing, surprised. "You'd let me do that?" "I told you, I'm not asking you to be helpless. I'm asking you to be safe. Those aren't mutually exclusive." Luca stood, moving around the desk to face her directly. "You didn't choose this situation, Rachel. Neither did I. But we're in it together now, whether we like it or not. We can fight each other and make ourselves weaker, or we can work together and survive this." "Survive this? Then what?" "Then you decide. You want to return to your old life? I'll facilitate that. You want to raise this child alone? I'll provide support without interference. You want—" He paused, something shifting in his expression. You want to explore what this could be? We'll figure that out together. Rachel studied his face, looking for deception or manipulation, but all she saw was exhaustion and a kind of grim determination that mirrored her own. I don't trust you, she said quietly. I don't expect you to. Not yet. Luca's voice was equally quiet. But I am going to keep you alive. That much you can count on. A phone buzzed on his desk. Luca glanced at the screen and his expression hardened. Excuse me. I need to take this. He answered in rapid Italian, his tone sharp and commanding. Rachel didn't understand the words, but she understood the tone. This was Luca Valenti in his element, making decisions that probably involved violence and strategy in equal measure. She left the office, suddenly needing air despite the secure confines of the estate. Elena intercepted her in the hallway, offering to show her the grounds. Rachel accepted, grateful for any distraction from the surreal reality of her new existence. The property was extensive, gardens, a pool, even a small private beach on the water's edge, beautiful and isolating in equal measure. As they walked, Elena pointed out security features disguised as landscaping, cameras hidden in trees, sensors buried along the perimeter. He's very serious about protection, Elena said. I've worked for Mr. Valenti for 8 years. I've never seen him this focused on someone's safety. Because I'm carrying his child. I'm valuable cargo. Elena's expression suggested she knew better but wouldn't argue. Perhaps. Or perhaps there's more to it than that. Before Rachel could respond, one of Luca's security team approached quickly. Dr. Hart, Mr. Valenti needs you back at the house immediately. The tone made Rachel's blood run cold. She followed him back at a near run, Elena close behind. They found Luca in a room filled with security monitors, watching footage that made Rachel's hands shake. On the screens, her apartment building, her veterinary practice, Derek's office, all under surveillance by multiple teams. Curti's people, Luca explained tersely. They're watching every place you might run to, every person you might contact. They've escalated faster than I anticipated. My staff, Rachel breathed. My colleagues, are they in danger? Not if they don't have information about you, but we need to assume everyone in your life is being monitored. Luca turned to her. This is why the secure video call this afternoon is critical. You need to tell your family that you're safe but can't be contacted. You need to convince them not to search for you. They'll never believe I'm safe if I tell them not to look for me. That's exactly what a kidnapping victim would be forced to say. Then convince them you're making this choice, that you need time, that you'll contact them when it's safe. Luca's eyes held hers. I know it's asking a lot, but their safety depends on their ignorance right now. Rachel felt the walls closing in despite the mansion's spacious rooms. Every aspect of her old life was being watched, weaponized, turned into potential danger. Derek, her colleagues, her friends, all of them unwitting participants in a war she hadn't known existed until yesterday. Show me how to fight back, she said suddenly. Luca raised an eyebrow. What? You said, I don't have to be helpless. So show me. Teach me how to protect myself. How to understand what's happening. How to be part of the solution instead of just the problem everyone's fighting over. Something shifted in Luca's expression. Respect, maybe, or recognition. All right, but it starts with understanding who we're really dealing with. Come with me. He led her to a different room, this one set up like a strategic operations center. Maps on the walls, photographs, connection diagrams that looked like something from a crime thriller. This is Arben Kurti's organization, Luca explained, pointing to the central hub. He operates legitimate businesses, restaurants, construction, import-export. But underneath, he runs trafficking networks, protection rackets, and money laundering on a scale most people can't imagine. Rachel studied the maps, seeing patterns emerge. He's been trying to push you out of territories you control. For years, but I'm entrenched. I have relationships, history, loyalty that he can't easily break. So he tried a different approach. Luca's finger moved to a different section of the map. If he can't push me out through force, he'll use leverage, personal leverage. Me? You? And the child? Rachel's hand moved to her stomach again. This baby is 8 weeks along, barely formed. How is that leverage? Because I'm someone who doesn't have family, who doesn't have people I care about in ways that create vulnerability. Until now. Luca's voice was quiet. Kurti researched me, found my medical records, and created a situation where I would care, where I would have something to lose. That's strategic and horrifying. Welcome to my world. Rachel studied the photographs of Kurti's organization, committing faces to memory. If these were the people hunting her, she needed to recognize them, needed to understand the threat. The fertility clinic, she said. Someone there had to be working with Kurti. Otherwise, they couldn't have switched the genetic material. Dr. Martin Reeves, the specialist who handled your procedure. Luca pulled up a photograph of a man in his 40s with thinning hair and nervous eyes. He's disappeared, probably being protected by Kurti until this resolves. Or until he becomes a liability. Luca smiled grimly. You learn fast. They spent the next 2 hours going through everything, the timeline of the operation, the security failures at the clinic, the pattern of surveillance on Rachel that had started weeks before the wedding. Luca laid it all out with clinical precision, and Rachel absorbed it with the same focus she brought to diagnosing complex veterinary cases. By the time Elena interrupted to announce the scheduled video call with her family, Rachel's head was spinning with information, but she felt more grounded. Knowledge was power, even in a powerless situation. The call was set up in a secure room, the camera positioned so Rachel's background would be neutral, no hints about her location. When Emily's face appeared on the screen, relief and fury warring in her expression, Rachel had to fight back tears. Rachel! Oh my God, where are you? What happened? We've been going out of our minds. I'm safe, Em. I promise, I'm safe. Their father appeared next to Emily, his face haggard with worry. Rachel, sweetheart, the police are looking for you. Derek filed a missing persons report. There were shooters at the wedding, and then you just... I know it looks bad, but I need you to trust me. Rachel took a breath, choosing her words carefully. The man who took me, Luca Valenti. He saved my life. Those shooters were targeting me specifically. If he hadn't gotten me out, I'd be dead or worse. Emily's eyes widened. Why would anyone target you? You're a vet. You're not involved in anything dangerous. I am now. Because of the baby. Silence on the other end. Then Emily whispered, Derek's baby? No. That's what I thought, but it's complicated. The fertility clinic made a mistake. A deliberate mistake. The baby's father is Luca Valenti, and there are people who want to use that against him. Their father looked like he might pass out. Rachel, this is insane. You're talking about criminals and conspiracies, and I'm talking about reality, Dad. My reality right now. And I need you to trust that I'm making the best choice I can in an impossible situation. Rachel leaned closer to the camera. I need you to stop looking for me. I need you to tell the police you heard from me and I'm safe. I need you to go about your lives as normally as possible until this is resolved. How long? Emily demanded. How long are you going to be, wherever you are? I don't know, weeks, maybe, but I will contact you when I can, I promise. And if we don't hear from you, if something happens, Rachel glanced off camera toward where Luca stood just out of frame. Then Luca will make sure you know, but nothing is going to happen. I'm protected. Emily's expression said she had about 1,000 more questions, but their father put a hand on her shoulder. We love you, sweetheart. Whatever you need, whatever we can do, just stay safe. Both of you. And don't trust anyone who asks questions about me or where I might be. Not Derek, not my colleagues, not anyone. Derek's been calling constantly, Emily said. He's demanded to speak with us, with the police, with everyone. He's either genuinely worried or a really good actor. Probably genuinely worried. This wasn't supposed to happen on his watch. His perfect plan just imploded spectacularly. Rachel felt a twinge of guilt, but pushed it aside. Derek would survive the embarrassment and the questions. She might not survive the alternative. They talked for a few more minutes, Rachel reassuring them over and over that she was unharmed, that she had medical care, that she was being treated well. By the time the call ended, she felt both better and worse. Better for seeing their faces, hearing their voices. Worse for the lies she'd had to tell, the information she'd had to withhold. Luca appeared in the doorway as the screen went dark. You did well. That wasn't easy. None of this is easy. Rachel stood, suddenly restless again. But at least they know I'm alive. That's something. It's more than something. It's essential. Kurti will try to use their fear against us. Now they have a baseline of safety to hold on to. Rachel studied his face, this man who'd crashed into her life with such devastating effect. Why are you doing this? Really? You could have just let Kurti take me. Could have negotiated some other way. Luca was quiet for a long moment. Because you didn't deserve to become collateral damage in a war you didn't start. Because the child you're carrying is innocent of all of this. And because, he paused, something vulnerable flickering across his features. Because the idea of someone using creation itself as a weapon makes me sick. What they did to you, to both of us, that can't stand. It was the most honest thing he'd said since crashing her wedding, and Rachel felt something shift between them. Not trust, not yet, but maybe the foundation for it. Thank you, she said quietly. For that, for the honesty. You're welcome. Luca glanced at his watch. I have a meeting with some of my people in 20 minutes. You're welcome to join if you want to understand more about how we operate, or Elena can show you more of the grounds. Your choice. Rachel thought about it for maybe 3 seconds. I'll come to the meeting. If I'm stuck in this world, I want to understand how it works. Luca's slight smile suggested approval. Fair enough, but some of the discussion will be explicit, about strategy and consequences. I performed surgery on a mastiff with internal bleeding last month. I can handle explicit. The meeting room was windowless and serious, with 6 of Luca's key people already assembled when they entered. They stood as Rachel entered, a show of respect that felt both surreal and oddly appropriate. Luca introduced her simply as Dr. Hart. No explanation of her presence required. The discussion that followed was like nothing Rachel had ever experienced. These people talked about territory and revenue and enforcement with the same casual precision she used discussing treatment protocols. They debated strategies for identifying Kurti's surveillance teams, for securing Rachel's former associates without revealing her location, for putting pressure on the fertility clinic to surrender Dr. Reeves. Rachel listened, absorbing the vocabulary of violence wrapped in corporate efficiency. She watched Luca manage his people with quiet authority, never raising his voice but clearly commanding absolute respect. This was his element, his expertise, and it was both terrifying and strangely fascinating. When the meeting ended, one of the men, Marco, Luca's second-in-command, approached Rachel directly. Dr. Hart, I know this is all overwhelming, but I want you to know that every person in this organization understands you're under our protection. No one will harm you. No one will allow you to be harmed. Even though I'm here against my will, Marco's expression didn't change. Semantics aside, you're here because the alternative is unacceptable. We take that responsibility seriously. After everyone left, Rachel sat alone in the meeting room, processing everything she'd heard. The scope of Luca's organization was vast. Hundreds of people, millions in revenue, operations spanning multiple states. And now all of that machinery had pivoted to protecting one veterinarian who'd become an unwitting pawn in someone else's game. The weight of it was crushing. Rachel stood and made her way back to her room, exhaustion hitting her again like a wave. The pregnancy was making her tire more easily, she realized. She'd need to be more conscious of rest, of taking care of herself and the tiny life growing inside her. As she settled into bed that night, her hand on her stomach, Rachel whispered to the baby again. I don't know how this is going to end. I don't know if your father is a monster or just a man trying to survive in a monstrous world, but I know one thing. I will keep you safe, whatever it takes. Somewhere in the mansion, Luca Valenti was probably still working, still planning, still coordinating the war that would determine their futures. And Rachel Hart, veterinarian and unwilling participant in a criminal conspiracy, closed her eyes and tried to imagine a world where this all somehow worked out. The dream, when it came, was of garden gates exploding and engines roaring and steel-gray eyes promising protection in a voice that sounded almost like truth. Rachel woke to the sound of rain hammering against the windows, the kind of relentless downpour that turned Boston into a gray watercolor painting. For a disorienting moment, she forgot where she was. Then the unfamiliar weight of Egyptian cotton sheets and the too-large bedroom brought it all crashing back. 3 days. She'd been in Luca Valenti's fortress for 3 days. She rolled onto her side, her hand automatically moving to her stomach. The morning sickness had started yesterday, arriving with a vengeance that made her grateful for the private bathroom and Elena's quiet appearance with crackers and ginger tea. The baby was making its presence known in more ways than one. A soft knock interrupted her thoughts. Elena entered with a breakfast tray, her expression carefully neutral. Mr. Valenti asked me to tell you that Dr. Chen will be here this afternoon for your first prenatal checkup. He's arranged for all the necessary equipment. Of course he has. Rachel sat up slowly, fighting a wave of nausea. Where is he? Dealing with a situation in the city. He should be back by noon. Elena set the tray on the bedside table and hesitated. Dr. Hart, may I speak candidly? Rachel nodded, curious about what would make the usually reserved housekeeper request permission. I know this isn't the life you chose. I know you're frightened and angry and probably feel very alone right now. Elena's voice was gentle. But I've watched Mr. Valenti transform this entire organization to protect you. He's called in favors that took years to build. He's redirected resources that could have been used for lucrative operations. He's doing everything in his considerable power to keep you safe. Because I'm carrying his child. Because I'm leverage he can't afford to lose. Perhaps that's how it started. Elena moved toward the door. But I don't think that's why he paced the hallway outside your room for 2 hours last night when you were sick. A man protecting an asset doesn't lose sleep over morning sickness. She left before Rachel could respond, the words hanging in the air like smoke. Rachel forced down toast and tea, then showered and dressed in the comfortable clothes that kept appearing in her closet. Someone, probably Elena, was doing laundry and restocking daily, maintaining the illusion that this was a luxury hotel rather than protective custody. She was starting to learn the mansion's rhythms. Morning meant relative quiet, while Luca's security team changed shifts. Afternoons brought meetings in the war room, as Rachel had started thinking of the Strategic Operations Center. Evenings were unpredictable. Sometimes Luca would appear for dinner, other times she'd eat alone while he coordinated operations she was only beginning to understand. Today, she had a plan. She'd been granted access to her veterinary practice's digital records, and one of her patients, a German shepherd named Atlas with a recurring digestive issue, needed her attention. The dog's owner had been sending increasingly worried messages, and Rachel couldn't just abandon her responsibilities because her life had imploded. She set up her laptop in the library, a beautiful room lined with books that suggested Luca's reading habits were far more literary than she'd expected. Hemingway and Dante sat next to modern thrillers and dense philosophy texts. She'd pulled down a copy of Marcus Aurelius's Meditations 2 nights ago and found handwritten notes in the margins. Luca's handwriting, she assumed, full of sharp observations about power and duty. The video consultation with Atlas's owner, Mrs. Patterson, went smoothly at first. Rachel examined the latest test results, asked detailed questions about the dog's symptoms, and was adjusting the treatment plan when she noticed movement in the background of Mrs. Patterson's video feed. A man, just visible through the kitchen doorway, watching. Rachel's blood went cold. She kept her expression neutral, finished the consultation professionally, then immediately called for Luca's security team. Marco appeared within seconds. There was someone at Mrs. Patterson's house. Watching the call, Rachel pulled up the recording, freezing the frame where the figure was visible. Is that one of Curti's men? We've had him on surveillance lists. Marco's expression darkened. He's monitoring your patient contacts, looking for patterns, for information. Mrs. Patterson is 73 years old. She has a sick dog. She's not part of this. She is now. Anyone who has contact with you becomes a potential source of intelligence. Marco was already on his phone, speaking rapidly in Italian. We'll increase surveillance on your regular clients. Make sure they're not being pressured for information. Rachel felt sick, and it had nothing to do with morning sickness. This is insane. These are innocent people who just want their pets taken care of. I know, and that's exactly why Curti is using them. He knows you'll care about their safety. The library door opened and Luca strode in, his suit jacket dotted with rain, his expression grim. I heard. Marco, get surveillance on Mrs. Patterson's house immediately. If they approach her directly, I want to know about it. Marco left quickly. Luca moved to where Rachel sat, studying the frozen video frame. This is an escalation. He's getting bolder. He's terrorizing elderly women with sick pets. That's not bold. It's cruel. It's strategic. He's showing us he can reach into every aspect of your life. Luca's jaw clenched. We need to accelerate our timeline. Timeline for what? For going on offense instead of just defense. Luca pulled up a chair, sitting across from her with the laptop between them. We've been gathering intelligence on Curti's operation. We have enough now to start dismantling it piece by piece, but it's going to require your help. Rachel closed the laptop slowly. What kind of help? The fertility clinic. Dr. Reeves, who switched the genetic material. We've located him. He's in a safe house Curti maintains in Cambridge, but we need leverage to extract him without starting a war in the middle of a residential neighborhood. And I'm the leverage. You're the reason he did this in the first place. His medical license, his career, his freedom. He threw it all away because Curti offered him something he wanted more. If we can figure out what that was, we can use it against him. Rachel thought about Dr. Reeves, the nervous competent specialist who'd handled her IVF procedure with what had seemed like genuine care. He has a daughter, Ivy. She was in medical school last I heard. He talked about her constantly. Luca's expression sharpened. Medical school is expensive. If Curti offered to fund it, to guarantee her future, he'd do anything, including violate every ethical standard of his profession. Rachel felt a surge of anger. So we use his daughter against him? That makes us just as bad as Curti. We don't use her. We offer her the truth. We show her what her father did and give her the choice to help us or watch him go down for it. Luca leaned forward. Rachel, I know this world is ugly. I know these choices feel impossible, but the alternative is letting Curti continue to hurt innocent people. Mrs. Patterson is just the beginning. He'll keep escalating until he gets what he wants. Which is me. And the baby. Which is leverage over me. You and the baby are just the mechanism. Luca's voice softened. I'm not going to let that happen. But I need you to be part of the solution, not just the person we're protecting. Rachel stood, pacing the library. Rain streaked the windows, turning the world outside into wavering shadows. 3 days ago, she'd been about to marry Derek Hale in a ceremony that felt like a business merger. Now she was discussing strategy with a mafia boss about how to leverage a doctor's love for his daughter. How had her life become this? If I help you get to Dr. Reeves, she said slowly, what happens to him? He testifies about Curti's involvement in the fertility clinic operation. He provides evidence that can be used by federal authorities. Then he enters witness protection with his daughter, and they both get a chance at a real life away from this world. And if he refuses? Luca's silence was answer enough. Rachel turned to face him. I won't be part of killing him. I won't help you if that's the plan. The plan is to give him a choice. What he does with that choice determines his outcome. Luca stood, closing the distance between them. I'm not asking you to become someone you're not, Rachel. I'm asking you to help stop someone who violated you in the most fundamental way possible. He stole your agency, your choice, your control over your own body. Don't you want justice for that? Justice. The word resonated in ways Rachel hadn't expected. She'd been so focused on survival, on understanding the immediate threat, that she hadn't let herself feel the full weight of what had been done to her. Dr. Reeves had looked her in the eye, had smiled professionally, had performed a medical procedure while knowing he was using stolen genetic material to impregnate her with a stranger's child. The violation of it hit her like a physical blow. Yes, she whispered. I want justice. Then help me get it. Over the next 2 hours, they planned. Luca brought in his intelligence team and Rachel provided everything she knew about Dr. Reeves, his habits, his weak points, his relationship with his daughter. They built a profile of a man who was brilliant but ethically compromised, devoted to his daughter but willing to destroy others to secure her future. Ivy Reeves is in her 3rd year at Johns Hopkins, one of Luca's analysts reported. Full scholarship that appeared suddenly after her father started working with the fertility clinic. No financial aid required, all expenses covered by an anonymous donor. Curti, Rachel said. That's the payment. Not money for Dr. Reeves, but security for his daughter. Luca nodded. Which means if we threaten to expose the scholarship's source, we threaten Ivy's future. That's the leverage. No, Rachel's voice was sharp. We don't threaten his daughter. We tell her the truth and let her decide how to respond. She deserves to know what her education cost. The room fell silent. Luca's men looked at him, waiting for direction. Rachel held his gaze, refusing to back down on this point. Finally, Luca smiled slightly. All right, we do it your way. We contact Ivy Reeves and tell her everything. But if she chooses to protect her father despite knowing what he did, then we find another approach. But we try honesty first. It was decided. They would reach out to Ivy through secure channels, present her with evidence of her father's actions and the source of her scholarship funding, and offer her a choice. Help them bring her father in peacefully, or watch the truth destroy both their lives when it inevitably came out. The meeting broke up, leaving Rachel alone with Luca in the war room. He stood at the window, looking out at the rain-soaked grounds, his shoulders tense. "You're not what I expected," he said quietly. "What did you expect?" "Someone who would either collapse under the pressure or fight me at every turn. Not someone who would engage with the strategy and push for a more ethical approach." He turned to face her. "You're making this more complicated." "Good. It should be complicated. We're talking about people's lives." "In my world, complications get people killed." "Then maybe your world needs to change." Rachel moved closer, close enough to see the exhaustion in his eyes, the weight he carried in the set of his jaw. "You said this yourself. What Kurti did, using creation as a weapon, it's wrong. If we fight him using the same tactics, we're no better than he is." Luca was quiet for a long moment. "You really believe that?" "I have to. Otherwise, what's the point of any of this?" Something shifted in his expression, a crack in the armor he wore so carefully. "My mother used to say something similar, that power without principle was just tyranny wearing a better suit." It was the first personal detail he'd shared that wasn't directly related to the current crisis. Rachel filed it away, a small piece of the puzzle that was Luca Valenti. "What happened to her?" Rachel asked gently. "She died when I was 16. Cancer." His voice was carefully neutral. "My father handled it by throwing himself deeper into the business. I handled it by deciding to be better than him." "Better how?" "Less violence, more strategy. Building legitimate operations alongside the illegal ones. Creating paths out for people who wanted to leave this life." Luca's eyes met hers. "My father thought I was weak. Most of his generation did. But the organization is stronger now than it's ever been. And we've had fewer casualties in 5 years than he had in 6 months." Rachel absorbed this, seeing Luca in a new light. Not just a criminal, but someone trying to reform a system from within. Someone who'd chosen to crash her wedding not just because she was leverage, but because letting her be taken by Kurti would have violated every principle he'd built his leadership on. "That's why you can't just give Kurti what he wants," she said, understanding dawning. "It's not about territory or pride. It's about proving that your way works." "Partly, but it's also about you." Luca stepped closer, and Rachel caught the scent of rain and expensive cologne. "You didn't deserve to become a casualty in this war, and the child you're carrying, our child, deserves better than to be born into violence." "Our child." The words hung between them, heavy with implications neither was ready to fully explore. Elena appeared in the doorway, breaking the moment. "Dr. Chen is here for Dr. Hart's appointment." The prenatal checkup was thorough and professional. Dr. Chen set up a portable ultrasound in one of the mansion's converted medical rooms, and Rachel found herself lying on an exam table that was far more comfortable than the one in her OBGYN's office back in Boston. "Everything looks good," Dr. Chen said, moving the ultrasound wand across Rachel's abdomen. "Fetal development is right on track for 9 weeks. Heartbeat is strong." Rachel stared at the monitor, watching the tiny flutter that represented her baby's heart. It was real. All of this chaos and danger and impossible choices, and at the center of it was this tiny life that hadn't asked to be created as a weapon. "Would you like to hear it?" Dr. Chen asked. Rachel nodded, not trusting her voice. A moment later, the room filled with the rapid whoosh-whoosh of the fetal heartbeat, impossibly fast, impossibly strong, impossibly precious. She didn't realize she was crying until Dr. Chen handed her a tissue. "It's overwhelming," the doctor said kindly. "Pregnancy is emotional under normal circumstances. Under these circumstances are insane," Rachel whispered. This baby was created by criminals using stolen genetic material as part of a plot to control a mafia boss. That's not a circumstances. That's a nightmare. And yet the baby is innocent. The heartbeat you're hearing doesn't care about the circumstances of conception. It just knows how to grow, how to become. Rachel wiped her eyes, still watching the monitor. Can I have a copy of the ultrasound? Of course. Dr. Chen printed several images, and Rachel held them carefully, studying the grainy gray shape that was somehow her child, Luca's child. A baby that shouldn't exist but did, that represented violation and hope in equal measure. After Dr. Chen left, Rachel sat alone in the medical room, the ultrasound images in her lap. She heard footsteps in the hallway, Luca's distinctive stride, but he didn't enter, just paused outside the door, silent. "You can come in," Rachel called out. He entered slowly, his eyes going immediately to the images in her hands. "Is everything fine? Everything's fine. The baby's healthy." Rachel held out one of the ultrasound printouts. "Do you want to see?" Luca took the image carefully, studying it with an intensity that surprised her. His expression shifted through several emotions too quickly to name: wonder, fear, something that might have been grief. "I never thought I'd have children," he said quietly. It seemed too dangerous, too much risk that they'd become targets or leverage or casualties. Safer to just not have that vulnerability. And now you have it anyway, courtesy of your enemies. Courtesy of circumstances neither of us controlled. Luca looked up from the ultrasound. But this baby, what we do next, the choices we make, that we can control, that's on us. Rachel stood, taking the image back and placing it carefully with the others. Dr. Chen said I'm 9 weeks along. That means I have 31 weeks before this becomes even more complicated. 31 weeks to figure out how to bring a child into this world safely. We'll figure it out. Will we? Rachel turned to face him fully. Because right now, I'm trapped in your mansion while people hunt me. I can't see my family in person. I can't go to my practice. I can't have a normal prenatal appointment at a normal doctor's office. What kind of life is this for a baby? A temporary one. Once Kurti's threat is neutralized, then what? What comes after? Do I go back to my old life and pretend none of this happened? Do I raise this baby alone while you send child support checks from your illegal empire? Do we... She stopped, not quite ready to voice the other possibility. Do we what? Luca's voice was quiet, but intense. Rachel met his eyes. Do we figure out how to co-parent a child when we barely know each other and exist in completely different worlds? I don't have answers to those questions yet, but I know we have time to find them. Luca moved closer. Rachel, I know I upended your entire life. I know you were about to marry someone safe and predictable, and instead you got me in chaos and danger. But we're in this together now, and I meant what I said. I'm going to keep you safe, both of you. Before Rachel could respond, Marco burst into the room, his phone in hand and his expression urgent. We have a situation. Ivy Reeves responded to our contact. Luca's demeanor shifted instantly from vulnerable to commanding. And? She wants to meet, tonight. She says if we can prove what we're claiming about her father, she'll help us. But it has to be in person, and she wants Dr. Hart there. Rachel's heart raced. Why me? Because you're the victim. She wants to hear directly from the person her father violated. Marco looked between them. It's a risk. Could be a trap. Kurti might know we've contacted her. Or it could be our best chance to get Dr. Reeves without violence. Luca was already thinking through the angles. Rachel could see it in his eyes. Where does she want to meet? Public place. The medical library at Johns Hopkins. She'll be there until midnight studying for exams. Baltimore. That's 4 hours from here, and we'd be on Kurti's territory. Luca shook his head. Too exposed. Then we offer an alternative, Rachel said. Somewhere between here and there. Somewhere public enough that she'll feel safe, but secure enough that we can control the environment. They settled on a coffee shop in Providence. Neutral ground, 2 hours from Boston, with enough late-night foot traffic to discourage violence, but private corners where they could talk. Luca's team would secure the location in advance, and Rachel would meet with Ivy face-to-face while Luca's people maintained a protective perimeter. The drive to Providence felt longer than 2 hours. Rachel sat in the back of the armored SUV next to Luca, watching the highway lights blur past, her mind running through everything she wanted to say to Ivy Reeves. How did you tell someone that their father had violated another woman's body for their benefit? How did you ask them to betray family for the sake of justice? You don't have to do this, Luca said, reading her tension. I can have someone else make the approach. No, she asked for me. She deserves to hear it from me. Rachel twisted her hands in her lap. But I don't know how to do this. How to destroy someone's world and ask for their help in the same conversation. You tell her the truth. You show her the evidence. You give her the choice. Luca's hand covered hers briefly. That's all you can do. The coffee shop was exactly as advertised, busy enough to provide cover, quiet enough to allow conversation. Luca's team had arrived an hour earlier and secured positions throughout the establishment and surrounding area. Rachel felt their presence like a protective net, invisible but constant. Ivy Reeves sat in a corner booth exactly as she'd described herself, petite, dark-haired, wearing Johns Hopkins Medical School sweatshirt and looking younger than her 25 years. She stood when Rachel approached, her expression wary but curious. Dr. Hart? Ivy, thank you for meeting with me. Rachel slid into the booth across from her. I know this is overwhelming. You claim my father did something terrible, that my education is paid for with blood money. That sounds like more than overwhelming. Ivy's voice shook slightly. Show me proof. Rachel pulled out the tablet she'd brought and opened the files they'd compiled. Medical records from the fertility clinic showing the genetic material switch. Financial records tracing Ivy's scholarship to one of Curti's shell corporations. Photos of Dr. Reeves meeting with known Curti associates. Ivy's face went pale as she scrolled through the evidence. This can't be real. My father wouldn't. He's a good man. He helps people. He violated me, Rachel said quietly. I went to that clinic trusting that the procedure would be done ethically and professionally. Instead, he used stolen genetic material to impregnate me with a stranger's child as part of a criminal conspiracy. That's what paid for your education. Tears streamed down Ivy's face. I didn't know. I swear I didn't know. I believe you, but now you do know, and you have a choice to make. Rachel leaned forward. Your father is in hiding with dangerous people. If you help us reach him, if you can convince him to testify against the organization that orchestrated this, then both of you can enter witness protection. You can finish medical school somewhere else, start over with a clean slate. But if you choose to protect him despite knowing what he did, then we both go down when this comes out. Ivy wiped her eyes with shaking hands. That's not a choice. That's a threat. That's reality. The truth is going to come out eventually. The only question is whether you're complicit in what your father did or a victim of his choices. Ivy was silent for a long moment, staring at the tablet screen. Finally, she looked up. What do you need me to do? Rachel felt relief wash through her. Call your father. Tell him you need to see him urgently. Medical emergency, family crisis, whatever will get him to leave his safe house. We'll take it from there. And you promise, truly promise, that he won't be hurt? We're not interested in violence. We want testimony and evidence. Your father cooperates. He walks away alive. Rachel paused. I can't make the same promise if Curti realizes he's become a liability. That sealed it. Ivy pulled out her phone with trembling hands and made the call. Rachel listened to her performance, genuine distress over a fabricated medical crisis, desperate need to see her father immediately. Doctor. Reeves apparently took the bait, agreeing to meet Ivy at a location she specified, a parking garage near the Providence train station. Luca's team moved into position. Rachel and Ivy waited in the coffee shop, the younger woman pale and silent, occasionally wiping away tears. Rachel wanted to offer comfort, but didn't know how. What comfort could she give when she'd just destroyed someone's understanding of their parent? 45 minutes later, Marco appeared at their booth. We have him, clean extraction, no complications. He's asking for his daughter. Ivy stood on shaky legs. I need to see him. They transported both women to a secure location, a warehouse Luca's organization used for sensitive meetings. Dr. Martin Reeves sat in a chair in the center of a sparse room, looking smaller and older than Rachel remembered. When he saw Ivy, his expression crumbled. Ivy, sweetheart, what's happening? Are you okay? I'm fine, Dad, but you're not. Ivy's voice was stronger now, anger replacing fear. Tell me these people are lying. Tell me you didn't do what they're claiming. Dr. Reeves looked at Rachel for the first time, and recognition flashed across his face, followed by shame. "Oh God," he whispered. "Dr. Hart, I didn't want to." "But you did," Rachel said, moving closer. "You looked me in the eye, performed a procedure, and used stolen genetic material to impregnate me with a stranger's child. Why?" "They had evidence. About my gambling debts, about money I'd borrowed from the wrong people. They said they'd hurt Ivy if I didn't cooperate. And then they said they'd make it all go away. Pay for her education, clear my debts, give us a fresh start. All I had to do was one thing. One procedure." Tears ran down his face. "I'm so sorry. I'm so profoundly sorry." Luca stepped forward from where he'd been standing in the shadows. "Your apology means nothing without action. You're going to testify about Curti's operation. You're going to provide evidence about the fertility clinic's involvement. And then you're going to disappear into federal protection with your daughter. Those are your options." Dr. Reeves looked at Ivy, who stared back with a mixture of love and disgust. "What do you want me to do, sweetheart?" "I want you to fix this," Ivy said. "I want you to help these people stop the criminals you got involved with. And then I want to finish medical school knowing I earned it myself, not through someone else's suffering." It was decided. Dr. Reeves would cooperate fully, providing testimony and evidence in exchange for protection. Luca's legal team, yes, apparently criminals had lawyers too, would facilitate the federal handoff. Within 48 hours, Dr. Reeves would be in government custody, and Curti would lose a valuable asset. Rachel watched it all unfold with a strange sense of detachment. This was justice, she supposed. Not the clean, clear kind from television dramas, but the messy, complicated kind that real life offered. Dr. Reeves would face consequences, but he'd also get a chance to rebuild. Ivy would have to live with the knowledge of what her education cost, but she'd also have the opportunity to prove herself on her own merit. As they prepared to leave the warehouse, Ivy approached Rachel one last time. "I know this doesn't fix what my father did to you, but for what it's worth, I hope your baby is healthy. I hope you both get the future you deserve." Rachel nodded, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. What future did she deserve? She didn't even know anymore. The drive back to the mansion was silent. Luca made calls in Italian, coordinating the handoff and ensuring Dr. Reeves would make it to federal custody alive. Rachel stared out the window, watching Providence give way to Massachusetts countryside, her hand resting on her stomach. "You did well tonight," Luca said when he finally ended his calls. "Ivy responded to your honesty. That's not something I could have achieved. I just told her the truth. That's not an achievement, that's baseline human decency. In my world, baseline human decency is rarer than you'd think." Luca shifted to face her more directly. "You're changing how my people think about this situation. Marco told me earlier that he'd never seen someone fight for ethical outcomes the way you do. It's making them question their assumptions." "Good. Maybe they should question them." They arrived back at the mansion near midnight. Rachel was exhausted, emotionally and physically drained from the evening's events. She went straight to her room, but sleep eluded her despite the fatigue. She kept thinking about Ivy's face when she realized what her father had done, about Dr. Reeves's shame and desperation, about the impossible choices people made when they were trapped between bad options, about the baby growing inside her, 9 weeks along now, with a strong heartbeat and a future that remained terrifyingly uncertain. A soft knock on her door surprised her. "Come in," she called. Luca entered, still in his suit from the meeting, looking as tired as she felt. "I saw your light was still on. Couldn't sleep?" "Too much in my head." Rachel sat up against the headboard. "What happens now? With Dr. Reeves's testimony? Federal authorities will use it to build a case against Curti's organization. It won't happen overnight, but it creates pressure, forces him to reallocate resources to protect his operations instead of focusing on you. So we bought time. We bought time and took away one of his assets. It's progress." Luca moved closer to the bed, but didn't sit. "Rachel, I want to ask you something, and I need you to be honest." "All right. Do you regret it? Helping tonight, getting involved in the strategy instead of just staying protected and removed?" Rachel considered the question carefully. No, I'm not built to be passive. I'm not someone who can hide while other people fight my battles. Even if those battles are terrifying and morally complicated. Luca smiled slightly. That's what I thought, which is why I have a proposal for you. A proposal? The fertility clinic. It's still operating, still performing procedures, still potentially being used by Curti for other schemes. We have an opportunity to shut it down completely, but it would require your expertise. He pulled out his phone and showed her a series of files. We need someone with medical knowledge to identify the specific violations, to document the evidence in a way that regulatory authorities will act on immediately. Rachel took the phone, scrolling through what looked like internal clinic records. You want me to help build a case against the entire facility. I want you to use your skills to stop them from doing to anyone else what they did to you. It was manipulation, Rachel knew. Luca was appealing to her sense of justice, her need for purpose, her professional expertise. But it was also truth. The clinic was still operating, still vulnerable to being exploited by criminals like Curti. All right, she said, I'll help, but on one condition. Name it. After this is done, after we've dealt with Curti and the clinic and all of it, you help me figure out how to build a real life again. Not just survival, but actual living, for me and for this baby. Luca was quiet for a moment, something shifting in his expression. Deal. We'll figure it out together. He left her alone then, and Rachel finally felt sleep tugging at her consciousness. As she drifted off, she thought about the strange partnership forming between her and Luca Valenti. Built on circumstance and necessity, yes, but maybe growing into something more deliberate. Rachel woke to chaos. The sound that pulled her from sleep wasn't the gentle knock of Elena with breakfast or the distant rumble of Luca's security team changing shifts. It was the sharp crack of gunfire, close enough that her windows rattled with the percussion. She bolted upright, her heart hammering against her ribs. More gunfire. Shouting. The distinctive sound of breaking glass from somewhere below. Her door burst open and Marco appeared, weapon drawn, his expression locked in combat mode. Stay down, away from the windows, now! Rachel dropped to the floor, her medical training overriding panic. What's happening? They found us, Curti's people, full assault on the estate. Marco moved to the window, staying to the side as he assessed the situation below. We're holding them at the perimeter, but they came in force. The reality of it crashed over her like ice water. This wasn't a theoretical threat anymore. This was a war, and she was at the center of it. Where's Luca? Coordinating defense. He's getting you to the safe room. Marco spoke into his radio in rapid Italian, then turned back to her. Stay low. Follow me exactly. Understand? Rachel nodded, her mouth too dry to speak. She stayed on her hands and knees, following Marco out of the bedroom and down the hallway. The sounds of battle grew louder, gunfire exchanging in staccato bursts, men shouting orders, the wail of what sounded like an alarm system. They made it to the stairs when the window at the end of the hall exploded inward. Glass sprayed everywhere. Marco shoved Rachel behind him, returning fire at shapes moving in the darkness outside. She pressed herself against the wall, her hands instinctively covering her stomach. The baby. She had to protect the baby. Luca appeared from the lower floor, taking the stairs 3 at a time. His suit jacket was gone, his white shirt partially unbuttoned, and he carried a weapon with the casual competence of someone who'd done this 1,000 times. Blood streaked his left arm, but he didn't seem to notice. You're hit, Rachel said, her veterinary instincts kicking in despite the circumstances. It's nothing. Move. He grabbed her hand, pulling her toward a section of wall that looked identical to all the others. He pressed something and the wall slid open, revealing a reinforced door. Inside. Now. The safe room was exactly what it sounded like. A windowless, reinforced space with its own air supply, monitors showing security feeds, and enough supplies to last days if necessary. Luca practically pushed Rachel inside, but when she turned expecting him to follow, he stayed in the doorway. You're not coming in, she realized, her voice rising with panic. I need to coordinate the defense. Keep my people alive. Keep you alive. His eyes met hers, and she saw something fierce and protective there. You'll be safe here. The door locks from inside. No one gets through without the code. Rachel. He stepped closer, his hand cupping her face for a brief moment. I will come back, I promise, But right now, I need you to lock this door and stay away from the monitors. What happens out there? You don't need to see it." More gunfire erupted, closer now. Luca's radio crackled with urgent Italian. He pulled back, his expression hardening back into the dangerous man who'd crashed her wedding. "Lock it," he ordered, then disappeared. Rachel stood frozen for a moment, her hand hovering over the control panel. Every instinct screamed at her to help somehow, to not just hide while people fought and bled and died. But she had the baby to think about, the life growing inside her that depended entirely on her survival. She locked the door. The safe room was eerily quiet, the thick walls muffling most of the sounds from outside. But the monitors showed everything in stark black and white. Rachel told herself not to look, to follow Luca's advice and stay away from the screens. She lasted maybe 30 seconds. The estate grounds were a battlefield. She counted at least 20 attackers, maybe more, moving with military precision toward the mansion. Luca's security team had taken defensive positions, using the architecture and landscaping for cover. Muzzle flashes lit up the night like deadly fireflies. Rachel watched Luca move through the chaos with terrifying efficiency. He wasn't just coordinating, he was fighting, engaging the attackers directly, while somehow still maintaining tactical awareness of the entire situation. She saw him take down 2 men who'd breached the eastern wall, then immediately shift to help Marco's position on the south side. This was his world. This was what he meant when he talked about his particular skill set. Violence as a language he spoke fluently, a tool he wielded with precision. The attack lasted 47 minutes. Rachel knew because she couldn't stop watching the clock on the wall, counting every second, praying that Luca would survive each minute. She watched men fall on both sides, watched the beautiful gardens she'd walked through become scarred with bullet holes and blood. When the attackers finally retreated, leaving behind 3 bodies and taking their wounded with them, Rachel felt her legs give out. She sank to the floor, her back against the reinforced wall, her whole body shaking. The baby. Was the baby okay? Could stress like this hurt the baby? She pressed her hands against her stomach, willing herself to calm down. Deep breaths. The baby needed calm. The baby needed her to be okay. 20 minutes passed before the door unlocked. Luca stood there, looking like he'd walked through hell. Blood on his shirt, some his, some probably not. A cut above his eyebrow, bruises already forming on his jaw, but alive. Rachel launched herself at him without thinking, her arms wrapping around his neck. He caught her automatically, one arm coming around her waist to steady her. "You're alive," she whispered against his shoulder. "You're alive." "I promised I'd come back." His voice was rough, exhausted. "Are you hurt? Did anything?" "I'm fine. We're fine." She pulled back enough to look at his face. "But you're not. You need medical attention. Dr. Chen is already on her way, so is Elena to help clean up." Luca guided her out of the safe room, keeping his body between her and the worst of the damage visible in the hallway. "I need you to go back to your room. Elena will bring you something to help you sleep." "I'm not going to sleep. Are you insane?" Rachel stopped walking, forcing him to face her. "Your estate just got attacked. People died. You're bleeding. And you think I'm going to take a sleeping pill and pretend this didn't happen? I think you're pregnant and stressed, and this kind of trauma isn't good for you or the baby." His expression was firm despite the exhaustion. "Please, Rachel, let me handle this part." "Handle what part? The cleanup? The body count? The explanation for why Curti just threw everything at you?" She felt hysteria bubbling up. "I watched people die on those monitors. I watched you kill people. I can't just go to my room and pretend that's normal." Luca's jaw clenched. "This is my world. This is what I tried to protect you from seeing." "Well, I saw it. I saw all of it, and I can't unsee it." Rachel's voice cracked. "Is this what my life is now? Hiding in safe rooms while you fight wars? Watching people die over a baby that shouldn't even exist?" "Rachel, no, don't Rachel me. Don't use that calm voice like you're talking down a scared animal." She pulled away from him, anger replacing fear. "I need the truth. All of it. Why did Curti escalate like this? What changed?" Luca was quiet for a long moment, clearly debating how much to tell her. Finally, he sighed. "Dr. Reeves gave his testimony to federal authorities yesterday. Curti knows we have evidence that could dismantle his entire operation. This was retaliation and a message. He can reach us anywhere." So we're not safer, we're in more danger. In the short term, yes, but strategically we're winning. Kurti's desperate. Desperate men make mistakes. Rachel laughed, the sound bitter and wrong. Great. We're winning. Meanwhile, people are dead and I'm trapped in a mansion that just got shot to pieces. I know this is hard. Hard. Luca, this is insane. My life was supposed to be about healing animals and building a quiet practice, and maybe having a family someday with someone safe and boring. Instead, I'm pregnant with a mafia boss's baby, hiding from Albanian criminals who want to cut me open and steal my child. That's not hard. That's impossible. Her voice broke on the last word, and suddenly she was crying, huge, gasping sobs that she couldn't control. All the fear and anger and stress of the past week came pouring out in waves that left her shaking. Luca pulled her close, and this time she didn't resist. She buried her face in his blood-stained shirt and cried while he held her, one hand stroking her hair, murmuring quiet reassurances in Italian that she didn't understand but somehow found comforting anyway. "I've got you," he said finally, switching back to English. "I know it's impossible. I know it's too much, but I've got you." Elena appeared with Dr. Chen, both women taking in the scene with professional calm. Dr. Chen approached carefully, her medical bag in hand. "Dr. Hart, I need to check you and the baby. Make sure the stress didn't cause any complications." Rachel nodded, allowing herself to be guided back to her room. The space looked untouched. The attack hadn't reached this part of the mansion, but she'd never feel safe here again. Dr. Chen's examination was thorough and gentle. She checked Rachel's vital signs, listened to the baby's heartbeat with a portable Doppler, asked questions about cramping or bleeding or any unusual symptoms. "Everything looks good," she said finally, her expression relieved. "The baby's heartbeat is strong, no signs of distress, but you need rest, Rachel. Real rest. Your body is under tremendous stress." "She can give me rest when Kurti's dead," Rachel said flatly. Dr. Chen exchanged a glance with Elena. "I'm going to recommend a mild sedative, just enough to help you sleep for a few hours. It's safe for the baby, and necessary for you." Dr. Chen's voice was kind but firm. "Please, let your body recover." Rachel was too exhausted to argue. She accepted the pill, let Elena help her into pajamas, and climbed into bed. As the medication began to work, softening the edges of her panic, she heard voices in the hallway, Luca and Dr. Chen talking in low tones. "The stress could cause complications if it continues," Dr. Chen said. "She's strong, but pregnancy makes everything more delicate. Another attack like tonight won't happen. I'm doubling security, bringing in reinforcements from our operations in New York and Philadelphia." Luca's voice was hard with determination. "Kurti made his move. Now I make mine." "What does that mean?" "It means this ends. Soon. One way or another." Rachel wanted to ask what he meant, what he was planning, but the sedative pulled her under before she could form the words. She dreamed of gunfire and blood, of steel-gray eyes watching her from across a battlefield, of a tiny heartbeat that kept rhythm with her own terrified pulse. When she woke, sunlight streamed through the windows. The clock said it was past noon. She'd slept for almost 12 hours. Her body felt heavy, disconnected, like she was moving through water. Elena appeared with lunch, her expression carefully cheerful. "Mr. Valenti asked me to tell you he's in meetings, but we'll check on you this afternoon." "Meetings about what?" "I'm not privy to those details, dear, but the estate is secure. The damage from last night is being repaired. You're safe." Safe. Rachel was starting to hate that word. She ate mechanically, showered, and dressed in comfortable clothes that Elena had thoughtfully laid out. Then she did what she'd been doing every day for the past week. She tried to maintain some semblance of her normal life. She logged into her veterinary practice's system and reviewed patient files. Mrs. Patterson's dog Atlas was responding well to the adjusted treatment plan. A new case had come in, a cat with a urinary blockage that one of her colleagues had handled competently. The practice was functioning without her. Her phone, the secure one Luca had provided, showed messages from Emily asking if she was okay, saying she'd seen news reports about gang violence in the area, but didn't know if it was related. Rachel crafted a careful response saying she was fine, still safe, and would call soon. Everything was fine, everything was under control. Except nothing was fine and nothing was under control. Rachel found herself wandering the mansion, avoiding the areas where repairs were happening, but drawn to understand the full scope of what had happened. She counted bullet holes in the walls, saw blood stains that hadn't been completely cleaned yet, found a shattered window that overlooked the gardens where 3 men had died. "You shouldn't be looking at this," Luca's voice said from behind her. Rachel didn't turn around. "Did you kill them? The men who attacked?" "Some of them. My team killed others. Does it matter?" "It matters to me." Rachel finally faced him. He'd showered and changed, the blood and damage from last night replaced with his usual polished appearance, but she could see the exhaustion in his eyes, the tension in his shoulders. "I need to know who I'm—" She stopped, not sure how to finish that sentence. "Who you're what? Living with? Trusting? Carrying a child for?" "All of it." Luca moved to stand beside her at the window, looking out at the grounds being restored. "I've killed people, Rachel. Not many, and never without reason. But yes. I've taken lives to protect this organization, to protect people who depend on me, and last night, to protect you. Does it bother you?" "Every time. Anyone who tells you killing doesn't affect them is either lying or a psychopath." He turned to face her directly. "But I'd do it again. I'd do worse to keep you and that baby safe." Rachel absorbed this, trying to reconcile the man who spoke about philosophy and promised her choices with the man who killed efficiently and without hesitation. How do you live with that contradiction, being violent and principled at the same time? "I don't know if I do live with it well. I just keep moving forward and hope the scale eventually tips toward more good than harm." Luca's expression was raw in a way she'd never seen before. "You're right to question it. You should question it. That's what keeps people like me from becoming people like Curti." Before Rachel could respond, Marco appeared in the doorway. "Boss, we've got the surveillance reports from last night. You need to see this." They moved to the war room, where Luca's team had assembled detailed analysis of the attack. Rachel followed, ignoring Marco's questioning glance at Luca. If she was living in this nightmare, she was going to understand it completely. The surveillance footage showed the attack from multiple angles. Rachel watched as the team analyzed approach patterns, identified attackers, tracked their retreat route. It was clinical and disturbing in equal measure. "They knew our security layout," one of the analysts said, pointing to the screen. "They targeted weak points in our perimeter, moved with knowledge of our camera positions. Someone gave them intelligence." "A leak," Luca said quietly. "In our organization." The room went silent. Rachel might not understand all the dynamics of Luca's world, but she understood the gravity of that statement. Someone on the inside had betrayed them. "Who has access to our full security protocols?" Luca asked, his voice deadly calm. Marco pulled up a list. "Senior security team, household management, and your inner circle. Maybe 20 people total. Start vetting them, quietly. I want financial records, communication logs, anything unusual in the past month." Luca's expression was cold. Whoever did this is going to wish they'd never been born. Rachel watched the transformation, Luca shifting from the vulnerable man who'd held her while she cried to the dangerous leader who commanded absolute loyalty and dealt brutally with betrayal. It should have terrified her. Instead, she found herself speaking up. "Don't start with threats. Start with understanding why someone would betray you." Every head in the room turned toward her. Luca raised an eyebrow. "Explain." "People don't usually betray someone out of nowhere. There's a reason. Fear, money, coercion, ideology. If you understand the why, you're more likely to identify the who." Rachel moved closer to the screens showing personnel files. "Curti is smart. He wouldn't just offer money, he'd find leverage. Who on that list has vulnerabilities he could exploit?" Luca studied her for a moment, then nodded to his team. "You heard her? Look for pressure points. Family in trouble, debt, legal issues, anything Curti could use." The team scattered to follow orders. Marco stayed behind, looking at Rachel with new respect. "You think like a tactician. I think like a diagnostician. It's the same skill set, identifying patterns, finding the root cause." Rachel turned to Luca. "I want to help with this. Not just hide while you handle it." "Rachel, I'm serious. You said I don't have to be passive. Prove it. Let me help identify the leak." Luca hesitated, clearly torn between protecting her and respecting her need for agency. Finally, he gestured to the files. All right, but we work together. You don't make any moves without telling me first. Over the next several hours, they analyzed the personnel files together. Rachel brought a fresh perspective, noticing things Luca's team had missed. A security guard whose daughter had suddenly transferred to an expensive private school. An assistant whose gambling debts had been mysteriously paid off. A housekeeper whose immigration status had quietly been resolved. Any of these could be leverage points, Rachel said, highlighting the patterns she'd found. But the timing is what matters. When did these things happen relative to when Curti would have needed the information? Luca pulled up timelines, overlaying them with the personnel changes Rachel had identified. One name emerged as the most likely candidate, Vincent Rossi, a member of Luca's security team for 3 years, whose elderly mother had suddenly been admitted to an expensive care facility 6 weeks ago, right around the time Curti would have started planning the attack. Vincent, Luca said quietly, and Rachel could hear the betrayal in his voice. I trusted him. He's been with me since the beginning. Which is probably why Curti targeted him. Maximum damage from a trusted source. Rachel looked at the photograph of Vincent, a man in his 40s with kind eyes and a nervous smile. What are you going to do? Confront him. Get confirmation. Then, Luca stopped, glancing at Rachel. Then what, kill him? That's the standard response to betrayal in my world. Rachel thought about Vincent's elderly mother, about the impossible choice he'd probably faced between his loyalty and her care. Or you could use him. Feed false information back to Curti through Vincent. Make him think he still has access while you control what he knows. Luca's expression shifted to something that might have been admiration. You're suggesting we turn him into a double agent. I'm suggesting you use strategy instead of violence. Isn't that what you said you've built your leadership on? The confrontation with Vincent happened that evening in one of the mansion's interrogation rooms, a space Rachel had hoped never to see. Vincent sat in a chair, his face pale with fear as Luca and Marco stood over him. Rachel watched from behind one-way glass, her stomach churning. Your mother is in Sunrise Manor, Luca said conversationally. 24-hour nursing care, private room, all the best treatments for her Alzheimer's. That facility costs $45,000 a month. You make $60,000 a year. Vincent's hands shook. Mr. Valenti, I can explain. I'm sure you can. Curti approached you, offered to pay for your mother's care in exchange for information about my security protocols. You told yourself it wasn't really betrayal, that you were just giving him architectural details, nothing that would get anyone killed. Luca's voice was flat, emotionless. Then last night, 3 of my men died using the defensive positions you told Curti about. I didn't know he'd attack. I swear I didn't know. He said he just wanted to understand your security, that it was insurance, that... Vincent broke down, tears streaming down his face. My mother was dying. I couldn't afford the care she needed. What was I supposed to do? Rachel felt the observation room close in on her. This was the reality of Luca's world. Good people making terrible choices under impossible pressure, consequences that spiraled beyond anyone's control. Luca pulled out his phone and showed Vincent something. This is your mother, 3 hours ago. Happy, comfortable, being cared for by people who treat her with dignity. That ends tonight, unless you do exactly what I tell you. Anything. Please. I'll do anything. You're going to continue feeding information to Curti, but from now on, I control what information that is. You're going to help me set a trap, and when it closes, you're going to testify about his methods and his organization. Luca leaned closer. Do this successfully, and your mother stays in Sunrise Manor for the rest of her life, fully funded. Betray me again, and she's in a state facility by morning. Are we clear? Vincent nodded frantically. Yes, I understand. Thank you. Thank you. Rachel watched Luca transform a potential execution into a strategic asset, using mercy as a weapon more effective than violence. When he emerged from the interrogation room, she was waiting in the hallway. You're not going to kill him, she said. Not unless he gives me a reason to. Luca studied her face. You think I should? I think you did exactly what I hoped you would. You chose strategy over revenge. Rachel touched his arm briefly. That's who you are when you're at your best. Something shifted in Luca's expression, vulnerability breaking through his usual control. You see things in me that I'm not sure actually exist. They exist, I've watched you these past days. You're not just a criminal, Luca. You're someone trying to build something better out of a broken system. Or I'm someone very good at manipulation. Maybe both, but I don't think you're manipulating me right now. They stood in the hallway, the silence heavy with things neither was ready to say out loud. Finally, Luca stepped back, rebuilding his walls. We need to plan the next move. Now that we have Vincent, we can feed Curti false information about the fertility clinic raid. Raid? Rachel followed him toward the war room. What raid? The one we're going to conduct tomorrow night. Hit the clinic, seize their records, destroy Curti's ability to use that operation again. Luca pulled up building schematics on the screens. Vincent will tell Curti we're planning it for next week. That gives us a window when they're not expecting us. Rachel studied the plans, her medical knowledge kicking in. The records room is here, on the 3rd floor, but the genetic material storage is in the basement, temperature-controlled, high security. You need both to completely shut them down. Can you identify what records are critical? What we absolutely need to seize? I can do better than that. I can tell you how to destroy the genetic material storage without leaving forensic evidence. Rachel pointed to the ventilation system. Introduce warm air into the storage tanks. The samples will degrade naturally, look like equipment failure rather than sabotage. Luca smiled, and it was genuine. You're terrifyingly good at this. I spent years learning how biological systems work. This is just applied knowledge. They planned the raid together, Rachel providing medical and facility expertise while Luca handled the tactical elements. His team would go in after hours when only minimal security staff remained. They'd seize specific records Rachel identified as critical, destroy the genetic material storage, and leave enough evidence of Curti's involvement that regulatory authorities would have to investigate. What about the staff? Rachel asked. The nurses and technicians who work there, they're not all complicit. We're not targeting staff, just the facility and the evidence. Luca looked at her. I'm not Curti. I don't hurt innocent people to make a point. The raid was scheduled for the following night. Rachel spent the intervening hours reviewing the clinic's operational procedures, identifying the specific locations of critical records, and helping Luca's team understand the facility's layout from a medical perspective. She also spent time on the phone with Emily, who was getting increasingly worried despite Rachel's reassurances. You sound different, Emily said during their video call. Harder somehow. I'm not harder. I'm just dealing with things I never imagined having to deal with. This man, Luca. Are you safe with him? Really safe? Rachel thought about the question carefully. Safe from Curti? Yes. Safe in general? I don't know yet, but I trust him more than I did a week ago. That's not exactly a ringing endorsement. It's honest. That's all I can give you right now. After the call ended, Rachel found herself in the library again, drawn to the books that revealed pieces of Luca's character. She pulled down the Marcus Aurelius volume again, reading his Marginalia. Next to a passage about duty and choice, Luca had written, "We don't choose the circumstances of our power, only what we do with it." Rachel traced the words with her finger, wondering what circumstances had shaped Luca into the man he was. What choices had led him to build an empire on violence while trying to reform it from within? What made him capable of such tenderness and such brutality in equal measure? She was still reading when Luca found her hours later, well past midnight. Couldn't sleep? He asked, settling into the chair across from her. The baby's making me restless. Or maybe the impending raid on a fertility clinic. Hard to say which. Luca smiled slightly. You don't have to be part of tomorrow night. You've given us the information we need. You can stay here safe while we handle the execution. And wonder the whole time if something went wrong. If you got hurt? If the plan failed? Rachel shook her head. I'd rather be there helping. Rachel, it's dangerous. Things could go wrong. I can't protect you effectively if I'm also trying to coordinate a tactical operation. Then teach me to protect myself. Show me how to handle a weapon, how to stay safe in that environment. Rachel leaned forward. I'm not asking to be on the front lines, but I need to be there. That clinic violated me. I deserve to be part of shutting it down. Luca was quiet for a long moment, clearly weighing the risks. All right, but you follow orders exactly. No improvisation, no heroics. If I tell you to run, you run. Agreed? Agreed. The next day, Luca took her to the estate's shooting range, a facility Rachel hadn't known existed until now. He taught her basic handgun safety, how to hold a weapon properly, how to aim and fire. Rachel's hand shook the first few times, the weight and purpose of the gun making her nauseous. "I hate this," she said, after emptying a clip at the target. "I hate that I need to know this." "I know, but knowledge is protection." Luca adjusted her stance, his hands on her shoulders. "You don't have to like it. You just have to be capable of it, if necessary." By the time the sun set, Rachel could hit a stationary target with reasonable accuracy. It wasn't expert marksmanship, but it was enough to defend herself in an emergency. The raid was scheduled for midnight. Rachel dressed in dark, practical clothes Elena provided, pants with actual pockets, a shirt that didn't restrict movement, boots designed for running. She looked at herself in the mirror and barely recognized the woman staring back. 2 weeks ago, she'd been trying on a wedding dress. Tonight, she was preparing to raid a medical facility with a criminal organization. The drive to the clinic felt both endless and too short. Rachel sat in the SUV between Luca and Marco, her heart pounding against her ribs. The baby chose that moment to make itself known with a flutter of movement. The first time Rachel had actually felt it. Her hand flew to her stomach. "Oh," Luca noticed immediately. "What's wrong?" "Nothing. The baby just... I felt it move. First time." Rachel's eyes filled with tears despite the circumstances. "Sorry, hormones are insane right now." Luca's expression softened. "That's normal. Means the baby's healthy, growing." "You've been reading pregnancy books." "Someone has to. You've been too busy planning raids." They shared a smile. Brief, genuine, wholly inappropriate for the situation, but somehow essential. The clinic appeared ahead, dark except for minimal security lighting. Luca's team moved into position with practiced efficiency. Rachel stayed with Luca and Marco, following their lead as they entered through a service entrance that Vincent's intelligence had identified as the weakest access point. Inside, the clinic felt eerie in the darkness. Rachel had been here before, trusted these hallways, believed this place existed to help people build families. Now she knew it as something corrupted, turned into a weapon by men like Curti. They moved quietly through the building, Luca's team securing the security staff and beginning the evidence collection. Rachel guided them to the records room, identifying specific files that documented the illegal procedures and Curti's involvement. Then they headed to the basement, to the genetic materials storage. The room was exactly as Rachel remembered from her research. Rows of storage tanks maintaining precise temperatures, computer systems monitoring every sample. Thousands of vials representing hope and possibility for families desperate for children. And somewhere in those tanks, the stolen sample that had been used to create her pregnancy. "This is it," Rachel said quietly, pointing to the ventilation controls. "Adjust the temperature up by 15 degrees over the next hour. The samples will degrade naturally. Curti's material, but also everything else." Luca hesitated. "You're sure? These samples represent a lot of innocent people's futures. And this facility violated those futures by proving it can't be trusted to protect them." Rachel's voice was firm. Better to destroy everything than let Curti keep using this place as a weapon. Luca nodded to his tech specialist, who began adjusting the temperature controls. Rachel watched the readings climb, knowing she was destroying the very system that had been used to violate her. It felt like justice. Complicated, messy justice, but justice nonetheless. They were preparing to leave when alarms suddenly blared through the building. Luca's radio crackled with urgent Italian, his lookouts reporting vehicles approaching fast. "Curti's people," Marco said, his weapon already drawn. Vincent's information wasn't enough to keep them away. "Or they didn't believe it," Luca said grimly. "They're here to protect their asset." Rachel's training kicked in. Assess the situation, identify exits, prepare for the worst. Luca grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the emergency stairs as his team moved to engage the incoming threat. "We're getting you out, now!" They made it halfway up the stairs when gunfire erupted below. Rachel heard shouting, the distinctive sound of tactical teams engaging each other. Luca kept her moving, his body between her and the danger, his focus absolute. They emerged on the third floor just as men entered from the main stairwell. Curti's people, weapons drawn, blocking their escape route. Luca pushed Rachel behind him, his weapon coming up. Stay back. Whatever happens, stay behind me. The leader of Curti's team, a man with cold eyes and a cruel smile, stepped forward. Luca Valenti. Mr. Curti would like to negotiate. Tell Curti to go to hell. He expected you'd say that, which is why we came prepared with an alternative offer. The man's smile widened. Give us Dr. Hart, and we let your people walk out of here alive. Refuse, and we make this building a tomb for everyone inside. Rachel felt ice flood her veins. They'd walked into a trap. Despite Vincent's information, despite all their planning, Curti had anticipated their move and turned it against them. Luca's hand found hers, squeezing briefly. Then he spoke, his voice deadly calm. You're not taking her, you're not touching her, and if you think I'm going to trade lives for convenience, you don't know me at all. The man shrugged. Then we do this the hard way. Everything happened at once. Gunfire erupted from both sides. Luca shoved Rachel into an office, slamming the door and pushing a desk against it for cover. Outside, the battle raged. Close quarters, brutal efficiency, the kind of violence Rachel had only seen in movies. She crouched behind the desk, her hands over her stomach, praying to whatever forces governed the universe that the baby would survive this, that Luca would survive this, that somehow, impossibly, they'd make it out. The door splintered. A man forced his way through, weapon raised. Rachel recognized him from the surveillance photos, one of Curti's senior enforcers. His eyes locked on her, and she saw her death in them. Then Luca was there, tackling the man from behind. The two of them crashing into the wall with brutal force. They fought like animals. No rules, no mercy, just raw survival. Rachel watched in horror as they struggled, each trying to gain the upper hand. The enforcer got his weapon up. Rachel screamed a warning. Luca deflected the shot, the bullet going wild, but the enforcer used the momentum to throw Luca off. He raised the weapon again, this time aimed directly at Rachel. She didn't think, didn't hesitate. The weapon Luca had given her was in her hand, and she fired 3 times, just like he'd taught her. The enforcer went down. Rachel stared at what she'd done, her whole body shaking. She'd killed a man. Actually pulled the trigger and taken a life. The reality of it crashed over her in waves, horror, necessity, guilt, relief, all tangled together. Luca pulled her to her feet, checking her for injuries. Are you hurt? Did he touch you? Rachel couldn't speak, could only shake her head. We need to move. Marco's team secured the ground floor. There's a window. Luca pulled her toward the exit, and Rachel let herself be guided, her mind still processing what had just happened. They made it out through a side exit into the night air that felt impossibly clean after the gun smoke and violence. Luca's SUV was waiting, Marco at the wheel, the engine already running. They sped away from the clinic as sirens approached in the distance. Rachel sat in the back seat, staring at her hands, seeing blood that wasn't actually there. Rachel. Luca's voice was gentle, his hand covering hers. Look at me. She met his eyes and saw understanding there, empathy, shared experience. You did what you had to do, he said quietly. You protected yourself, protected the baby. That's not murder. That's survival. I killed someone. You survived. There's a difference. Rachel wanted to believe him, wanted to accept that pulling the trigger had been necessary and justified. But all she could see was the man falling, the life leaving his eyes, the irreversible consequence of her choice. She threw up in the car, her body rejecting everything, the violence, the fear, the impossible reality of what her life had become. Luca held her hair back, murmured reassurances, and directed Marco to drive faster. By the time they reached the estate, Rachel was hollow, emptied out. She let Elena guide her to the bathroom, help her shower off the gun smoke and metaphorical blood, and change into clean clothes. She submitted to Dr. Chen's examination, heard her confirm the baby was fine, that everything was still progressing normally. Normal. Nothing about this was normal. Luca appeared in her doorway hours later, after the sun had risen and the adrenaline had finally faded. He looked as exhausted as she felt. The clinic is finished, he said quietly. Between the evidence we seized and the damage to their storage, they'll never operate again. Regulatory authorities are already investigating based on anonymous tips we provided. Good. Rachel's voice sounded distant to her own ears. Rachel, what happened tonight? I don't want to talk about it. Not yet. She looked at him, this man who'd dragged her into his world of violence and strategy. I just need you to tell me one thing. Honestly, will this ever end? Will there ever be a day when we're not fighting for survival? Luca was quiet for a long moment. Yes, I promise you, this will end. And when it does, we'll build something better from what's left. Rachel nodded, too tired to question whether he could actually keep that promise. She woke later, still exhausted but unable to stay asleep. The memory of pulling the trigger played on loop behind her closed eyes. The weight of the gun, the recoil, the man falling. Rachel pressed her palms against her face, trying to push the images away, but they clung to her consciousness like oil. A soft knock interrupted her spiral. Elena entered with tea and what looked like homemade soup, her expression kind but knowing. You need to eat, dear. The baby needs nourishment even when you don't feel like eating. Rachel accepted the tray mechanically, forcing down spoonfuls of soup that tasted like nothing. Her hands were steady now, which somehow felt wrong. Shouldn't they still be shaking? Shouldn't her body still be registering the trauma of what she'd done? It gets easier, Elena said quietly, settling into the chair beside the bed. Not better, easier. You learn to carry it. Rachel looked up sharply. You've killed someone? Yes. Once. A long time ago, when I was younger and working in a very different capacity, Elena's eyes held old pain. A man broke into my apartment. I had a kitchen knife. He didn't expect me to fight back. How do you live with it? By understanding that survival isn't a sin, by knowing that the alternative would have been worse. Elena poured tea with practiced calm. Mr. Valenti has been pacing the hallway for the past hour, by the way, trying to decide if he should check on you or give you space. Tell him he can come in. Elena nodded and left. Minutes later, Luca appeared looking uncharacteristically uncertain. He'd changed out of his tactical gear into casual clothes, jeans and a dark sweater that made him look younger, more approachable. The cut above his eyebrow from the estate attack had scabbed over, and new bruises shadowed his jaw. How are you feeling? He asked, staying near the door. Like I killed someone last night. How should I be feeling? Luca moved closer, sitting carefully on the edge of the bed. Angry, guilty, numb, relieved, usually all of them at once. That's disturbingly accurate. Rachel set down her soup spoon. Does it get easier? Elena said it does, but I don't know if I believe her. The memory doesn't go away, but you learn to contextualize it, to understand it as a moment in time, not a defining characteristic. Luca's voice was gentle. You're not a killer, Rachel. You're someone who was forced into an impossible situation and made the only choice available. That sounds like justification. It's reality. There's a difference. He reached out, then stopped himself. May I? Rachel nodded, and Luca took her hand. His grip was warm, solid, grounding in a way that surprised her. I'm sorry, he said quietly. I promised to protect you, and instead I put you in a situation where you had to protect yourself. That's on me. You were fighting 3 other men. You couldn't be everywhere at once. Rachel squeezed his hand back. I don't blame you, Luca. I blame Curti. I blame the circumstances. I blame a universe that thought it was a good idea to engineer my pregnancy as a weapon. But I don't blame you. Something shifted in Luca's expression. Relief mixed with something deeper that Rachel wasn't ready to name yet. The raid was successful despite the ambush. We destroyed the clinic's genetic material storage, seized the records we needed, and left enough evidence that federal investigators showed up before dawn. The facility is shut down permanently. And Curti knows we hit it. Curti knows we're not backing down. That we're willing to go on offense. Luca's jaw tightened, which means he'll escalate again. He has to, or he loses face with his organization. Rachel felt exhaustion wash over her again, but underneath it was something harder. Anger, maybe, or determination. Then we need to end this. Actually end it, not just keep trading blows back and forth. I agree. Which is why I've called in some favors. Luca pulled out his phone, showing her a series of messages. Federal authorities are very interested in the evidence we provided about the fertility clinic. It connects to larger investigations they've been running on Curti's money laundering operations. They're offering a deal. We provide testimony and additional evidence. They dismantle his organization through legal channels. You're talking about cooperating with law enforcement. Isn't that against the mafia code or whatever? The mafia code is mostly mythology created by movies. Real organizations survive by being pragmatic. Luca's smile was grim. Besides, I'm not testifying about my operations. Just Curtis. Everyone wins except him. Rachel processed this, seeing the strategy underneath. You're using the legal system as a weapon, turning Curtis' own tactics against him. Exactly, but it requires careful coordination. We need to provide enough evidence to be credible without exposing our own vulnerabilities. Luca stood, pacing the room. Marco is handling the initial negotiations with the federal prosecutor, but there's another element we need to address. Which is? You. Your testimony about what was done to you at the fertility clinic is the emotional anchor of the case, the human element that makes it more than just financial crimes and territory disputes. Luca turned to face her. But I won't ask you to do it unless you're ready, unless you want to. Rachel thought about Dr. Reeves's testimony, about Ivy's choice to help despite the cost, about all the other women who might have been violated by the clinic's corruption, who might never know what was done to them. I'll do it, she said, but I want immunity for everyone in your organization who helped with the raid. They followed your orders. They shouldn't face consequences for doing the right thing. Luca's expression showed surprise and approval. You're negotiating like a professional. I'm protecting people I've come to care about. Elena, Marco, even Vincent, despite his betrayal. They're not villains. They're just trying to survive in your world. Our world, Luca corrected gently. Like it or not, it's yours now too. The federal prosecutor arrived 2 days later, a woman named Sarah Chen, who Rachel initially confused with Dr. Chen until Luca clarified they weren't related. Prosecutor Chen was in her 40s, sharp-eyed and no-nonsense, with the kind of presence that suggested she'd seen every trick and wasn't impressed by any of them. Dr. Hart, she said, settling into Luca's office with the confidence of someone who knew she held all the cards. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I know this situation is unusual. That's one word for it. Rachel sat across from her, Luca positioned slightly behind and to the side, present but deferring to Rachel's lead. What do you need from me? Your testimony about the fertility clinic procedure, the violation of your consent, the use of stolen genetic material, the conspiracy that put you in danger. Prosecutor Chen pulled out a tablet, showing Rachel preliminary documents. Your story is the foundation of our case against Curtis' organization. Without it, we're just talking about financial crimes and territorial disputes. Rachel read through the documents, seeing her violation laid out in clinical legal language. It was disturbing and validating in equal measure, proof that what had been done to her was real, criminal, prosecutable. What happens to Luca? She asked. If I testify, if you build this case, does he face charges too? Mr. Valenti has agreed to provide evidence about Curtis' operations in exchange for immunity on unrelated matters. As long as he cooperates fully and doesn't obstruct our investigation, his organization's activities are not our focus. Prosecutor Chen's gaze was steady. I'm not naive, Dr. Hart. I know what Mr. Valenti does, but I also know that sometimes you work with complicated people to take down worse ones. Pragmatic, Rachel said, echoing Luca's earlier words. Realistic. Curtis' organization is responsible for trafficking, money laundering, and at least 6 murders we can prove. Taking him down is worth the compromise of working with Mr. Valenti. Prosecutor Chen leaned forward. But I need to know you're willing to testify, to face Curtis in a courtroom and tell your story publicly. Rachel felt Luca's presence behind her, a silent support that somehow made the decision easier. I'll testify, but I have conditions. I'm listening. Full protection for my family, my sister, my father, anyone Curtis might target in retaliation. I want them under federal protection until this is resolved. Already arranged. And I want to know what happens to the other women. The fertility clinic has been operating for years. How many other procedures might have been compromised? How many other women are walking around not knowing they were violated? Prosecutor Chen's expression softened slightly. We're auditing every procedure from the past 5 years. Any woman who might have been affected will be notified and offered counseling and support. You have my word on that. Rachel nodded, feeling some small measure of justice in that promise. Then I'll testify. Tell me what you need. The preparation for testimony took weeks. Prosecutor Chen visited the estate regularly, walking Rachel through her story over and over, preparing her for the kinds of questions defense attorneys would ask, helping her stay focused on facts rather than emotions. It was exhausting and cathartic in turns. Meanwhile, Luca coordinated his side of the arrangement, providing the federal team with detailed information about Curti's financial operations, his trafficking networks, his legitimate business fronts. Rachel watched him work, saw how he compartmentalized the information, never giving away anything about his own operations while still being useful to the investigation. "You're very good at this," she observed one evening, finding him in the library surrounded by documents, walking the line between cooperation and self-preservation. "I've had practice. This isn't the first time I've worked with federal authorities." Luca looked up from his papers, fatigue evident in his eyes. "Sometimes the enemy of my enemy is a temporary ally." "Is that all the government is to you? A temporary ally?" "They're a force that can be leveraged for strategic purposes. Not friends, not enemies. Tools." He set down his pen. "Does that bother you?" Rachel considered the question honestly. 2 months ago, it would have. "Now I understand that survival requires using whatever tools are available. You taught me that." "I'm not sure if that's a compliment or an accusation." "Both, probably." Rachel settled into the chair across from him. "I've been thinking about what happens after the trial, after Curti's dealt with, after all of this is over." Luca's expression became carefully neutral. "And what have you concluded?" "That I don't want to go back to my old life. Not completely." The admission felt massive, like stepping off a cliff. "The veterinary practice? Yes. My work with animals? Absolutely. But the rest of it, the safe, predictable existence with someone like Derek, I can't do that anymore." "What do you want instead?" "I don't know yet. But I know it involves this baby, and somehow it involves you, and it's going to be complicated and probably dangerous and nothing like what I imagined my life would be." Rachel met his eyes directly. "Is that insane?" Luca was quiet for a long moment, his expression shifting through several emotions too complex to name. Finally, he spoke, his voice rough with something that sounded like hope. "It's not insane. It's terrifying and unprecedented and goes against every rule I've built my life around. But it's not insane." "What rules?" "Don't get attached. Don't let people close enough to become vulnerabilities. Don't build anything that can be used as leverage." Luca stood, moving to the window. "You violated every single one of those rules, Rachel. You and this baby that shouldn't exist. And instead of making me weaker, somehow you've made me—" He stopped, struggling with the words. "Made you what?" "Better. Clear about what I'm actually fighting for." He turned back to face her. "I built this organization on the principle of being less violent than my father, more strategic than my competitors. But it was all still just about power and control. Now I'm fighting for something that matters beyond territory and revenue." Rachel stood, closing the distance between them. "What are you fighting for?" "You. This baby. The possibility of building something legitimate that we can both be part of." Luca's hand came up, cupping her face gently. "I know it's too soon. I know we barely know each other outside of crisis and strategy. But I need you to know that this isn't just about the baby anymore. It's about you." Rachel's breath caught. They were standing too close, the air between them charged with everything they'd been carefully not acknowledging for weeks. The partnership born from necessity that had somehow evolved into something that felt dangerously close to trust, to affection, to possibilities neither had been looking for. "Luca," she started, not sure how to finish. He kissed her. Gentle at first, questioning, giving her every opportunity to pull away. Rachel didn't pull away. Instead, she leaned into it, her hands finding the front of his sweater, anchoring herself to this moment that felt both inevitable and impossible. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Rachel pressed her forehead against his. "This is a terrible idea. Probably the worst I've ever had. We're in the middle of a federal investigation. Curti's still trying to kill me. I'm pregnant with your baby because of a criminal conspiracy. This is possibly the worst timing in the history of terrible timing." "I know." Luca's arms came around her, holding her close. "We don't have to do anything about it right now. We can just acknowledge it. Admit that something's happening between us that isn't just about circumstances or the baby. Rachel pulled back enough to see his face. What if it doesn't work? What if we get through all of this and realize we only work together under pressure? Then we figure it out like adults. We co-parent, we stay in each other's lives, we build something functional, if not romantic. Luca's expression was serious. But I think we owe it to ourselves to find out. Once the immediate danger passes, once we have breathing room, we explore this, see what it could be. Okay, Rachel whispered, once we have breathing room. They stood together in the library, holding each other, neither wanting to break the moment. Outside, rain began to fall, drumming against the windows in rhythm with Rachel's heartbeat. The next morning brought news that shattered their fragile peace. Marco burst into the breakfast room where Rachel was forcing down eggs and toast, his face pale with urgency. We have a problem. Vincent's dead. Luca stood so quickly his chair toppled backward. What? Found in his apartment 2 hours ago. Single gunshot to the head, made to look like suicide. But the scene's wrong. Professional hit disguised poorly. Marco's voice was tight with anger. Curti knows he flipped. He's sending a message. Rachel felt ice flood her veins. Vincent, who'd betrayed them out of desperation, who'd agreed to help them in exchange for his mother's care. Dead because Curti had discovered his cooperation. His mother, she said quickly. Is she safe? We moved her to a different facility yesterday under an assumed name. She's secure. Marco looked at Luca. But this changes our timeline. If Curti's willing to eliminate his own assets, then he's preparing for an endgame. He knows we're working with federal authorities. He's cutting loose ends before they can testify. Luca was already moving toward the war room. Get everyone assembled. We need to accelerate the prosecution's timeline. The next hours were a blur of strategic planning. Prosecutor Chen arrived with her team, pale-faced after hearing about Vincent's death. They moved up the grand jury presentation, accelerated the indictment process, put everyone involved under enhanced protection. Rachel sat through the meetings, watching Luca transform into the tactical leader who commanded absolute authority. He was cold, precise, ruthless in his planning. This was the man who'd crashed her wedding, who'd killed without hesitation to protect her. The dangerous side she sometimes forgot when he was gentle with her, when he held her and talked about building something better. That evening, after the federal team had left and the estate had settled into tense quiet, Rachel found Luca on the terrace overlooking the grounds. He stood in the rain, not seeming to notice or care that he was getting soaked. You're going to catch pneumonia, she said, joining him despite her better judgment. Vincent had a daughter. Did you know that? She's 19, in college studying engineering. Now she's an orphan because her father tried to do the right thing after doing the wrong thing. Luca's voice was hollow. I promised him protection. I failed. Curti killed him. Not you. I put him in a position where Curti would target him. Same result. Luca finally looked at her, rain streaming down his face. This is what my world does, Rachel. It takes good people trying to survive and it destroys them. Vincent's daughter, Ivy Reeves, your own life. All collateral damage in wars that have nothing to do with you. Rachel stepped closer, taking his hand. Then we end the war. We make sure Curti can't hurt anyone else. And we build something different afterward. What if I can't? What if this is all I know how to do? Manage violence, leverage power, make impossible choices that get people killed. Then you learn something new, with me. Rachel pulled him toward the door, out of the rain. But first we survive this, together. The grand jury indictment came through 3 days later. The federal prosecutor unsealed charges against Arben Curti and 17 members of his organization, conspiracy, racketeering, money laundering, trafficking, and multiple counts of murder. The evidence Rachel and Luca had helped provide formed the foundation of the case. Curti's response was swift and brutal. Within hours of the indictment going public, 3 of his legitimate businesses were raided by federal agents. His assets were frozen. His associates began scrambling to cut deals and save themselves. But cornered animals were the most dangerous, and Curti was very cornered. The threat assessment came through Marco late that night. Curti's going dark. His known locations are empty, his usual communication channels are silent. He's planning something big. Define big, Luca said, though his expression suggested he already knew. He's burned his organization to the ground rather than let it be taken by federal authorities. Every asset liquidated, every operation shut down, every loose end eliminated. Marco's face was grim. He's got nothing left to lose, which means he's going to come after the one thing that still matters to him: revenge. Against me, Luca said. Against both of you, Marco corrected, his eyes moving to Rachel. He blames Dr. Hart for testifying, blames you for protecting her. He's going to try to take you both out before he disappears or gets arrested. Rachel felt the baby flutter inside her. 13 weeks now, becoming more real every day. She pressed her hand against her stomach protectively. Then we need to give him a target he can't resist. Draw him out before he has time to plan something we can't anticipate. Both men looked at her. Luca's expression was immediately resistant. Absolutely not. If you're suggesting using yourself as bait, I'm suggesting we take control of the situation instead of waiting for him to strike on his terms. Rachel moved to the tactical displays Marco had pulled up. He wants revenge. He wants to hurt you by hurting me. So we offer him the opportunity under controlled circumstances. Rachel, this is insane. You're pregnant. You've already been through too much, which is exactly why I want this ended. Now, before the baby gets any further along, before there's more risk. Rachel turned to face Luca directly. You said we're in this together. You said we'd figure it out together. That includes the endgame. Luca looked like he wanted to argue, to refuse outright. But Rachel could see him working through the logic, seeing the strategic sense underneath his emotional resistance. What are you proposing? He asked finally, his voice tight. A public appearance. Somewhere Curti would expect to be able to reach me. Somewhere with enough witnesses that he'd have to be careful, but not so secure that he'd know it's a trap. Rachel pulled up a calendar on her phone. The Boston Veterinary Association is holding a charity gala in 2 weeks. I was supposed to attend before everything. If I show up, make it known I'll be there, Curti will have to take the opportunity. You want to turn a charity gala into a combat zone. I want to turn it into the place where Curti gets arrested or eliminated, surrounded by federal agents and your security team, in a controlled environment where we dictate the terms. Rachel's voice was steady, despite her racing heart. It's risky, but waiting for him to strike on his terms is riskier. Marco was already running scenarios on his tablet. It could work. High-profile event means lots of security already in place. We can coordinate with federal authorities, position our people strategically, create a perimeter Curti would have to penetrate to reach Dr. Hart. And when he does penetrate it, because he will, he's that good. Luca's expression was dark. What happens when you're face-to-face with the man who orchestrated your violation and has been trying to kill you for weeks? Rachel met his eyes steadily. Then I trust that you'll be there to protect me, like you promised. The planning for the gala consumed the next 2 weeks. Federal authorities coordinated with Luca's security team in an unprecedented collaboration that made everyone uncomfortable but was necessary. Rachel worked with Prosecutor Chen to ensure that when Curti appeared, and they all agreed he would, there would be ironclad evidence to justify his arrest. Dr. Chen confirmed the baby's continued health, though she worried about Rachel's stress levels. Your blood pressure is elevated, not dangerously so, but concerning. You need to find ways to relax. I'll relax after Curti's in custody or dead, Rachel said flatly. Elena helped her prepare for the gala, finding a dress that accommodated her small but growing bump while still looking elegant. Rachel stared at herself in the mirror the day before the event, barely recognizing the woman staring back. She looked harder, older, like someone who'd seen too much in too short a time. Luca found her there, standing in front of the mirror in the beautiful dress, her hand on her stomach. He wore a tuxedo that made him look dangerous and sophisticated in equal measure. You look beautiful, he said quietly. I look terrified. That too. He moved behind her, meeting her eyes in the mirror. We can still call this off, find another way. There is no other way. Not one that ends this definitively. Rachel turned to face him. I need this over, Luca. I need to know that this baby can be born into a world where we're not constantly looking over our shoulders. I know. His hand settled on her waist, careful of the bump between them. Tomorrow night, whatever happens, I need you to promise me something. What? That you'll run if I tell you to, that you'll trust Marco and the federal team to protect you if I can't, that you'll put yourself and the baby first, even if it means leaving me behind. Rachel's throat tightened. Luca, promise me, Rachel, I can't do this if I'm worried you'll try to be a hero. She wanted to argue, to refuse to make a promise she might not be able to keep, but she saw the fear underneath his controlled exterior, the vulnerability he was allowing her to see. I promise, she whispered. But you have to promise me something too. Anything. That you'll survive. That you'll be there when this baby is born. That we'll get our chance to figure out what this is between us. Rachel reached up, touching his face. Promise me we get our shot at something normal. Luca pulled her close, holding her like she was the most precious thing in his world. I promise. We survive this together, and then we build whatever future we want. They stood together in the fading light, both knowing that tomorrow would change everything. That the gala would be the culmination of weeks of fear and strategy and impossible choices. That whatever happened, there would be no going back to who they were before. Rachel felt the baby move between them, a flutter of life that reminded her what they were fighting for. Not just survival, not just revenge, but the chance to build something good from the wreckage of everything that had gone wrong. I'm ready, she said finally, pulling back to meet Luca's eyes. Tomorrow. I'm ready. Luca nodded, his expression fierce with determination and something deeper. Then we end this, once and for all. The morning of the gala dawned clear and cold, the kind of Boston autumn day that promised early frost and changing leaves. Rachel stood at her bedroom window watching the sunrise paint the estate grounds in shades of gold and amber, her hand resting on the curve of her belly that had become more pronounced in recent weeks. 14 weeks pregnant. 3.5 months since the wedding that never was. A lifetime compressed into impossible days. The baby's moving more now, she said to Luca, who'd stayed with her through the night, neither of them able to sleep. Like it knows something big is happening today. Luca moved behind her, his arms coming around to rest over hers on her stomach. Probably just responding to your elevated heart rate. Babies can sense their mother's stress. Comforting, Rachel said dryly, but she leaned back against him, drawing strength from his solid presence. Are you scared? Terrified, but not of Kurti. His voice was quiet against her hair. I'm scared of losing this. Losing you, losing the future we haven't even had a chance to build yet. Rachel turned in his arms, studying his face in the golden morning light. The scar through his eyebrow had faded slightly, but new marks had appeared over the weeks of conflict. A thin line along his jaw from the estate attack, bruises that had finally healed from the clinic raid. Evidence of the violence that defined his world, written on his skin. We're not going to lose, she said with more confidence than she felt. We're going to end this today, and then we're going to figure out how to be normal people. Or as normal as a veterinarian and a reformed mafia boss can be. Luca smiled, and it transformed his face into something younger, lighter. Reformed is a strong word. I'm thinking more gradually transitioning toward legitimate business while maintaining strategic connections. Baby steps toward legitimacy. I can work with that. Rachel kissed him softly, a promise and a prayer wrapped together. Now let's go finish this. The preparation took hours. Marco and his team went over the security protocols again and again, coordinating with the federal agents who would be positioned throughout the gala venue. Prosecutor Chen arrived with final instructions for Rachel, walking her through exactly what to do when Kurti appeared. Don't engage with him directly, Chen said, her expression serious. Let him make the first move. Our agents will move in the moment he demonstrates clear intent to harm you. We need it to be clean, defensible in court. And if he doesn't wait for your agents? If he moves faster than you anticipate? Rachel's voice was steady despite the fear coiling in her stomach. Then Mr. Valenti's security team has authorization to intervene with whatever force is necessary to protect you. Chen glanced at Luca, who stood nearby monitoring everything. We all understand what's at stake here. Elena helped Rachel dress, her hands gentle as she fastened the deep emerald gown that somehow managed to be both elegant and concealing of the weapon Rachel wore strapped to her thigh. Just in case. She'd argued for it, and Luca had reluctantly agreed after making her practice drawing it smoothly dozens of times. You look like a warrior princess, Elena said, adjusting the necklace that hit a panic button connected directly to Marco's security channel. Beautiful and dangerous. I feel like I'm going to throw up, which might be morning sickness or terror, Hard to tell the difference anymore. Probably both. Elena stepped back, her eyes suspiciously bright. Dr. Hart, Rachel, I want you to know that watching you these past weeks has been extraordinary. You didn't let this world break you. You learned to fight back on your own terms. Rachel hugged her impulsively, this woman who'd shown her quiet kindness in the midst of chaos. Thank you for everything. For making this place feel less like a prison and more like a home, Elena finished gently. That's what it should be, what I hope it becomes, for both of you. The drive to the gala felt surreal. Rachel sat beside Luca in the armored SUV, surrounded by security vehicles that tried to look inconspicuous but fooled no one. Her colleagues from the veterinary practice would be at the event, people who'd known her before all of this, who still thought of her as the competent, quiet Dr. Hart, who preferred animals to people. What would they see when they looked at her now? You're quiet, Luca observed, his hand finding hers. Just thinking about how different everything is from 3 months ago. How different I am. Rachel squeezed his fingers. I was going to marry Derek. Can you imagine? I was actually going to spend my life with someone I didn't love because it seemed safe and sensible. And now you're walking into danger with a criminal, pregnant with his baby, about to use yourself as bait to catch an Albanian crime lord. Much more sensible. Rachel laughed despite the tension. When you put it that way, my decision-making skills seem questionable at best. Or you've learned that safety isn't the same as happiness, that sometimes the risky choice is the right one. Luca lifted her hand to his lips, kissing her knuckles. Whatever happens tonight, I want you to know. I don't regret any of it. Not crashing your wedding, not bringing you into my world, not falling for you in the most inconvenient way possible. Rachel's breath caught. They danced around the word for weeks, acknowledged the connection without naming it. But hearing Luca say it out loud made it real in a way that terrified and thrilled her equally. I don't regret it either, she whispered. Any of it. Even the parts that were horrible, because they led here. To us. The gala was being held at the Fairmont Copley Plaza, the same hotel where her wedding should have happened. Rachel felt the irony like a physical weight as they pulled up to the entrance. The gardens where Luca had crashed through the gates had been repaired, the lawn perfectly restored, no evidence remaining of the violence that had shattered her old life. Full circle, Luca murmured, clearly thinking the same thing. Let's hope this ending is better than that beginning. Marco and his team flanked them as they entered, their positions coordinated with the federal agents Rachel had been briefed to recognize. She spotted Prosecutor Chen near the bar, dressed in evening wear but scanning the crowd with professional intensity. 2 agents by the exits, 3 more positioned near the stage where the charity auction would take place later. And somewhere in this crowd of Boston's veterinary community and their wealthy supporters, Arbin Kurti would be watching, waiting for his moment. Rachel's colleagues descended immediately, their expressions a mixture of concern and curiosity. Dr. Patricia Mills, who'd been covering Rachel's surgeries for the past months, hugged her carefully. Rachel, we've been so worried. The news about what happened at your wedding, then you disappeared, are you okay? Is this... Her eyes moved to Luca with obvious questions. Is this the man from the wedding? It's complicated, Rachel said, which was the understatement of the century. Pat, this is Luca Valenti. Luca, Dr. Patricia Mills, my colleague and friend. Patricia shook Luca's hand with the wariness of someone who'd read too many news reports about violence and criminal organizations. Mr. Valenti, I've heard things. I'm sure you have. Most of them are probably true. Luca's smile was charming, but didn't quite reach his eyes, which continued scanning the crowd. Thank you for taking care of Rachel's patients while she's been dealing with personal matters. Personal matters. Patricia's gaze dropped to Rachel's stomach, where the dress couldn't quite hide the small bump. Oh my. Rachel, are you pregnant? Yes, 14 weeks. Rachel kept her voice steady, aware that Marco had tensed nearby, that Luca's hand had moved closer to his concealed weapon. Something had changed in the room's energy. It's been a complicated few months. That's putting it mildly. Patricia looked like she had 1,000 questions, but was too polite to ask them in public. Well, congratulations, I think, if that's appropriate. It is. Thank you. Rachel spotted movement near the terrace entrance, a man who matched Kurti's description from the surveillance photos, though he'd changed his appearance slightly. Gray hair instead of dark, glasses, a beard, but the cold eyes were unmistakable. "Pat, I need to circulate. We'll catch up properly soon, I promise." She moved away, Luca immediately at her side. "Northeast corner," she murmured. "Terrace entrance. That's him." "I see him. Marco, confirm identity." Luca spoke into his concealed microphone while maintaining his position next to Rachel, his hand settling on her lower back. To anyone watching, they looked like a couple attending a charity event. Only Rachel could feel the tension in his body, the coiled readiness for violence. Marco's voice came through the hidden earpiece Rachel wore. "Confirmed. Facial recognition match 97%. Federal team is moving into position. Hold your current location." Rachel felt her heart hammer against her ribs. This was it, the moment everything had been building toward. Kurti was here, in the same room, watching her, planning how to exact his revenge. The baby chose that moment to flutter against her hand, a reminder of what she was protecting. Not just herself, not just her future with Luca, but the innocent life that had been created as a weapon but would become something better if she survived the night. Kurti moved through the crowd with the confidence of someone who belonged, stopping to chat with donors, accepting champagne from passing servers. He was working his way closer to Rachel, unhurried, patient, playing the long game even now. "He's not going to make his move in the crowd," Luca said quietly. "Too many witnesses, too much security. He'll wait until you're isolated. Then we give him the opportunity. Somewhere we control." Rachel scanned the venue, spotting the hallway that led to the private meeting rooms. "The auction preview is in the East Wing. If I go to view the items alone, you're not going anywhere alone. I'll have Marco's team positioned along the route, federal agents at both ends, and you watching from close enough to intervene." Rachel turned to face Luca directly. "We agreed. We draw him out on our terms. This is how we do it." She could see him fighting every protective instinct, every urge to say no and keep her locked by his side. But they'd planned for this, anticipated it, and Luca had promised to trust her judgment. 30 seconds behind you," he said finally. "Any sign of trouble, you run. You use the panic button. You protect yourself and the baby first." "I remember the rules." Rachel touched his face briefly, aware of the eyes watching them. 30 seconds. I'll be counting." She moved through the crowd alone, feeling exposed despite knowing she was surrounded by protection. The hallway to the auction preview was well lit and populated with other guests examining the items up for bid: signed sports memorabilia, luxury vacation packages, original artwork. Rachel pretended interest in a painting of the Boston skyline while tracking Kurti's position through the reflection in the glass. He'd followed her, moving slowly, maintaining distance but definitely following. Rachel continued deeper into the exhibition space, toward the back where fewer people clustered. Her hand moved unconsciously to her stomach, a protective gesture that Kurti would certainly notice. Proof that the pregnancy was real, that the leverage he'd tried to create still existed. "Dr. Hart." His voice came from behind her, accented but smooth. "How lovely to finally meet you properly." Rachel turned slowly, meeting Arbin Kurti's cold eyes directly. Up close, she could see the cruelty in his pleasant smile, the calculation in every measured movement. This was the man who'd orchestrated her violation, who'd engineered her pregnancy as a weapon, who'd been trying to kill her for months. "Mr. Kurti, I can't say the pleasure is mutual." Rachel kept her voice steady, her hand moving slowly toward the panic button at her throat. "Please don't." Kurti's hand emerged from his jacket pocket, and Rachel saw the glint of a small weapon, something designed to avoid metal detectors, probably ceramic or advanced polymer. "I'd hate for this to become messy. So many innocent people nearby." Rachel froze, her training warring with terror. Where were the federal agents? Where was Marco's team? 30 seconds should have passed by now. "What do you want?" she asked, buying time. "Justice or revenge. The line between them is remarkably thin." Kurti moved closer, the weapon concealed but clearly aimed at her. "You cost me everything, Dr. Hart. My organization, my operations, my reputation, all because you couldn't simply accept your role in this." "My role? You violated me. You stole genetic material and used it to create a pregnancy without my consent. You turned my body into a battlefield." Rachel's voice shook with anger that overrode her fear. I didn't cost you anything. You destroyed yourself through your own choices. Such fire. Valenti must appreciate that, though I wonder if he'll still appreciate it when I've eliminated you and the leverage you represent. Curti's smile widened. Did you really think I wouldn't recognize a trap? That I wouldn't plan for your amateur attempt to draw me out? Rachel's blood went cold. What did you do? The same thing you did. I brought backup. Curti raised his other hand, showing her a phone with a simple message displayed. Now. Somewhere in the gala, an explosion rocked the building. Screams erupted from the main ballroom. The lights flickered and died, plunging the auction preview into darkness broken only by emergency lighting. Rachel ran. She didn't think, didn't hesitate. Her hand found the weapon strapped to her thigh, and she sprinted toward where she knew the emergency exit would be. Behind her, Curti shouted orders in Albanian, and she heard multiple sets of footsteps giving chase. The hallway was chaos. Guests fleeing the explosion, security personnel trying to establish control, smoke beginning to fill the air from whatever Curti had detonated in the ballroom. Rachel pushed through the crowd, her only thought to get to safety, to protect the baby, to survive. Strong hands grabbed her arm, and she spun, weapon rising automatically. Luca caught her wrist, his face appearing in the emergency lighting like an answer to a prayer. I've got you. This way. He pulled her toward a service entrance, Marco appearing on her other side, both men creating a protective barrier as they moved. Curti set off a smoke bomb in the main hall. Federal team is securing the building, but he has people positioned throughout. We need to get you out. They burst through the service entrance into a kitchen area, staff fleeing the smoke and confusion. Luca led them toward what looked like a loading dock exit, the quickest route to the armored vehicles waiting outside. They almost made it. Curti's men appeared from the shadows, weapons drawn, blocking their escape. 5 of them, professionals, creating a killing box that Marco and Luca immediately recognized. Down! Luca shoved Rachel behind a stainless steel counter as gunfire erupted. She crouched low, her hands covering her stomach, her whole body shaking as the battle raged around her. This was different from the clinic raid. Closer, more desperate, with fewer options for cover or escape. She heard Marco returning fire, heard Luca giving orders, heard men falling and others advancing. Then silence. Brief, terrible silence. Rachel risked looking over the counter and saw Luca and Marco standing over the bodies of Curti's men, both breathing hard, both bleeding from minor wounds. The exit was clear. Move, Luca said, pulling Rachel to her feet. Now, before what? Curti's voice came from the loading dock entrance, and Rachel saw him silhouetted against the outside lights, a larger weapon in his hands now. Before I finish what I started? He fired, and Luca pushed Rachel aside, taking the bullet meant for her. She watched in horror as he went down, blood spreading across his white shirt, his expression more surprised than pained. Luca! Rachel dropped beside him, her medical training taking over. Entry wound in the shoulder, bleeding but not arterial. He'd live if she could stop the hemorrhaging. Stay with me. Don't you dare. Rachel, run, Luca gasped, his hand finding hers. Please, like you promised. No, not without you. Marco engaged Curti, drawing his fire away from Rachel and Luca. She heard more gunfire, heard federal agents finally breaching the kitchen, heard Prosecutor Chen shouting orders. But all Rachel could see was Luca bleeding, his grip weakening in hers, his eyes starting to lose focus. Don't leave me, she whispered fiercely, pressing her hands against the wound. You promised we'd survive this together. You promised we'd build something. You don't get to break that promise. Rachel, his voice was fading. The baby. Protect. The baby needs a father. I need you. Rachel leaned closer, her tears falling on his face. Fight. Please fight. Hands pulled her away, federal agents securing the scene, calling for medical assistance. Rachel struggled against them, refusing to leave Luca, refusing to accept that after everything they'd survived, he might die protecting her. Paramedics arrived, working on Luca with professional efficiency. Rachel watched them, her veterinary knowledge translating the medical terminology, understanding that he was critical but stable, that the bullet had missed major organs but caused significant blood loss, that he might survive if they moved fast enough. Dr. Hart. Prosecutor Chen appeared at her side, her expression a mixture of relief and concern. We have Kurti in custody. His men are neutralized. The building is secure. You're safe. I don't care about safe. I care about him. Rachel gestured toward where paramedics were loading Luca onto a stretcher. I need to go with him. Of course. Agent Morrison will escort you to the hospital. We'll need your statement eventually, but that can wait. The ambulance ride was a blur. Rachel sat beside Luca, holding his hand, watching monitors that tracked his vital signs with beeping precision. He was unconscious now, the paramedics having sedated him to manage pain and prevent shock. Is the baby okay? One of the paramedics asked, noticing Rachel's protective hand on her stomach. I think so. I haven't felt anything wrong. Rachel realized she'd been so focused on Luca that she hadn't checked herself for injuries. I'm not bleeding or cramping. We'll have OB check you when we arrive, but try to stay calm. Stress isn't good for you or the baby. Stay calm. As if that were possible when the man she loved was bleeding out next to her, when her entire world had nearly ended in a kitchen loading dock, when everything she'd been fighting for hung in the balance. The hospital was chaos, trauma teams mobilizing, federal agents securing the area, media trucks already gathering outside after reports of the explosion at the gala. Rachel was whisked into an examination room while Luca was rushed to surgery. Dr. Chen, the geneticist, not the prosecutor, appeared and performed a quick ultrasound, her expression focused. The baby's heartbeat is strong, she said, and Rachel felt relief so intense she nearly passed out. No signs of distress or complications. You're incredibly lucky, Rachel. Luck had nothing to do with it. Luca took a bullet for me. Rachel's voice broke. He promised we'd survive together, and then he protected you. That's what he does. Dr. Chen squeezed her hand. And he's strong. He'll fight his way through this just like he's fought through everything else. Rachel waited in a private room, surrounded by federal agents and Marco's security team, all of them looking shell-shocked. Marco appeared hours later, his arm in a sling, his face haggard. Boss is out of surgery, bullet removed, blood loss controlled. Doctors say he'll make a full recovery with time. Marco sank into the chair beside Rachel. He's asking for you. Rachel was on her feet immediately. Take me to him. Luca's hospital room was too quiet, too sterile, too unlike the vibrant man who'd crashed into her life with such force. He lay in the bed looking pale and vulnerable, monitors beeping steadily, IV lines snaking into his arms. But his eyes opened when Rachel entered, and the smile he managed was pure Luca, defiant even in weakness. You're supposed to be resting, Rachel said, moving to his bedside and taking his hand carefully. I'll rest when I know you're okay. And the baby. His voice was rough but determined. We're fine. Both of us. The baby's heartbeat is strong. I'm uninjured. We survived. Rachel's tears came freely now, relief and fear and love all tangled together. You scared me. You promised you'd survive, and then you took a bullet. For you. I'd take 100 bullets for you. Luca's hand squeezed hers weakly. That's what you do when you love someone. You protect them, even when it's terrifying. Rachel leaned down carefully, kissing him softly. You're an idiot. A brave, wonderful, infuriating idiot. But I'm your idiot. Luca's smile widened slightly. We did it. Kurti's in custody. The threat is over. We can finally build that future we talked about, Rachel finished. Yes, we can. The next weeks were a strange mixture of recovery and resolution. Luca healed slowly, his shoulder requiring physical therapy and patience he didn't naturally possess. Rachel divided her time between the hospital and the estate, eventually moving Luca home when doctors cleared him for discharge. Prosecutor Chen secured convictions against Kurti and his organization based on the evidence they'd gathered. Dr. Reeves's testimony, Rachel's account of the fertility clinic violation, the documentation from the raid, all of it combined to dismantle what remained of Kurti's empire. Rachel's colleagues at the veterinary practice welcomed her back with cautious warmth, clearly unsure how to process everything that had happened. She eased back into work gradually, performing consultations and eventually surgeries as her pregnancy progressed. Derek reached out once, requesting a meeting that Rachel agreed to more for closure than any remaining connection. They met at a coffee shop, the conversation awkward and necessary in equal measure. I saw the news, Derek said, his expression carefully neutral. About the trial, about everything. I can't claim to understand it all. I barely understand it myself, Rachel admitted, but I'm sorry for how everything ended between us. You deserve better than a wedding that exploded into chaos. Did I, though? Derek's smile was rueful. I pushed for the fertility clinic procedure because I was afraid of passing on my genetic risks. I chose what felt safe and controlled instead of what might have been right. Maybe we both got the wake-up call we needed. Maybe. Are you doing okay? I'm dating someone. A woman I met at a conference who thinks my need for control is endearing rather than suffocating. Derek looked at Rachel's visible pregnancy bump. And you're clearly doing more than okay. Valenti, he's really the father? It's complicated, but yes, and he's... Rachel paused, trying to find words for what Luca had become to her. He's everything I didn't know I needed. Then I'm happy for you, genuinely. Derek stood, extending his hand. Good luck, Rachel. With the baby, with your new life, with all of it. Rachel shook his hand, feeling the final thread of her old life dissolve. Derek represented safety and predictability, a future that would have been comfortable and ultimately empty. Luca represented risk and passion, a future that terrified and thrilled her in equal measure. She knew which one she was choosing. Luca proposed on a Tuesday evening in late November, 3 months after the gala, 23 weeks into Rachel's pregnancy. They were in the library where they'd had so many crucial conversations, rain drumming against the windows in familiar rhythm. I know the timing is terrible, he said, kneeling carefully despite his still healing shoulder. You're pregnant. We've known each other less than 6 months. We met under the worst possible circumstances. Every rational argument says we should wait. But, Rachel prompted, her heart already knowing where this was going, but I love you. I love the strength you've shown, the principles you've held on to, the way you've refused to let my world corrupt who you are at your core. Luca pulled out a ring, simple, elegant, with an emerald the color of the dress she'd worn to the gala. I want to build that legitimate future we talked about. I want to be there when our baby is born. I want to spend whatever years I have earning the right to be called your husband. Rachel pulled him to his feet, not caring about his protest that he was supposed to be kneeling. Yes, to all of it. Yes. They married in February on the grounds of the estate, the same gardens that had been destroyed during the attack now restored and beautiful under fresh snow. The ceremony was small. Emily and Rachel's father, Marco and Elena, Dr. Chen, and a handful of Luca's people who'd become Rachel's friends through the chaos. Prosecutor Chen attended, having formed an unlikely friendship with Rachel through the trial proceedings. You're the only person I know who successfully reformed a criminal organization from the inside, she said during the reception. The legitimate businesses Luca's been building, the reduced violence, the support networks for people trying to leave the life. You did that. We did that, Rachel corrected, watching Luca laugh at something Marco said, looking lighter than she'd ever seen him. I just reminded him who he wanted to be. The baby arrived in late April during a thunderstorm that rattled the windows of the hospital delivery room. Luca held Rachel's hand through 13 hours of labor, never leaving her side despite her threats and his own fear. Their son entered the world screaming his protest at the indignity of birth, perfect and healthy and impossibly real. Rachel held him for the first time and understood in a way she never had before what they'd been fighting for all along. He has your eyes, Luca said, his voice rough with emotion as he touched their son's tiny hand, and your stubbornness. I can tell already. He better have your strategic mind and my medical skills. Otherwise, we're in trouble. Rachel couldn't stop looking at the baby, this impossible life that had started as a weapon and become the foundation of their family. What should we name him? They'd debated names for months without agreement, but looking at their son now, watching him clutch Luca's finger with surprising strength, the answer became obvious. Marcus, Rachel said, after Marcus Aurelius, the philosopher king who tried to make something better from difficult circumstances. Luca's expression showed surprise and deep emotion. You remembered. I remember everything about you, every margin note, every vulnerability you've shown me, every promise you've kept. Rachel shifted the baby so Luca could hold him. Meet Marcus Valenti Hart, the baby who changed everything. Life settled into something resembling normal over the following months, though normal for them looked different than it did for most people. Rachel reopened her veterinary practice in a new location, specializing in exotic animals and rescue cases. Luca transitioned more of his operations toward legitimate businesses, using the connections he'd built to create opportunities for people leaving criminal organizations. Marco became Marcus's godfather, an unofficial bodyguard, bringing an intensity to the role that made Rachel laugh and Luca proud. Elena transformed into the baby's grandmother in all but name, spoiling him relentlessly while teaching Rachel the patience required for new motherhood. They bought a house in the suburbs, smaller than the estate, but with a yard for Marcus to play in eventually, close to Rachel's new practice, far enough from Luca's old world to feel separate but not isolated. The estate became the headquarters for Luca's security consulting business, a legitimate operation that employed many of his former people in protective services for high-risk clients. On Marcus's first birthday, they returned to the Fairmont Copley Plaza for the Veterinary Association's annual gala. Rachel wore a different emerald dress. Luca at her side, both of them transformed from the desperate people who'd fought for survival in these same halls a year earlier. "Full circle," Luca murmured, echoing Rachel's words from that night. "But better this time." So much better. Rachel watched Marcus sleep in his carrier, peaceful and oblivious to the violence that had preceded his birth. "We did it. We survived and built something real from all that chaos. We did it together. That was always the key." Luca's arm came around her waist, pulling her close. "I never thanked you properly." "For what?" "For not giving up on me. On us. For seeing something worth saving underneath all the violence and criminal enterprise." His voice was soft, meant only for her. "For teaching me that love doesn't make you weak. It makes you stronger because you have something worth fighting for." Rachel turned in his arms, kissing him in the middle of the gala as guests milled around them. "You taught me something too, that safety isn't the same as happiness, that sometimes the riskiest choice leads to the most extraordinary life." They danced together while Marcus slept, swaying to music in a ballroom that had witnessed the destruction of Rachel's old life and the beginning of everything that came after. Other guests watched them, some with curiosity, some with judgment, all with the recognition that this was a couple with a story worth telling. Patricia Mills approached during a lull in the music, her expression warm despite her initial reservations about Luca. "Rachel, I have to say, you look happier than I've ever seen you. Marriage and motherhood clearly agree with you." "It's not the marriage or motherhood specifically. It's finding the right person to build that life with." Rachel glanced at Luca, who was being introduced to the Veterinary Association's president with surprising charm. "I almost married the wrong person because he felt safe. I'm glad I didn't." Even though the right person came with considerably more danger and complications, especially because of that, easy choices don't usually lead to extraordinary lives. The evening ended peacefully. No explosions, no violence, just a family heading home together after a successful charity event. Marcus woke during the car ride, fussing until Luca sang to him in Italian, a lullaby his own mother had sung that gentled the baby back towards sleep. Rachel watched them together. This man who'd crashed through gates to save her, who'd protected her through impossible circumstances, who'd chosen to become better because she'd believed he could be. And their son, the baby who'd been created as a weapon, but would grow up surrounded by love and possibility. "What are you thinking?" Luca asked, catching her watching. "That I'm grateful. For all of it, even the parts that were terrifying." Rachel reached across to touch Marcus's soft hair. "This life we're building, it's not what I imagined. It's better." "Better than marrying Derek Hale in a ceremony that felt like a business merger?" "Infinitely better than that," Rachel smiled, "though I could do without ever being shot at again." "Deal. I'll do my best to keep our lives boring from here on out." They both knew it was a promise he might not be able to keep. Luca's past would always carry some element of risk, some connection to a world where violence solved problems and loyalty meant everything. But he was choosing something different now, building something legitimate that Marcus could inherit without shame. The house welcomed them home, warm and bright despite the late hour. Rachel carried the sleeping baby upstairs while Luca checked the security systems, a habit that would probably never fade, evidence of the vigilance that had kept them alive through everything. She stood in Marcus's nursery, watching her son sleep in the crib Luca had assembled with Marco's help, arguing over instructions in Italian and English until Elena intervened. The room was painted soft blue with clouds drifting across the ceiling, a mobile of exotic animals rotating slowly above the crib. "He's perfect," Luca said from the doorway, his voice filled with wonder that hadn't diminished in the year since Marcus's birth. "How did we create something so perfect from such chaos?" Love has a way of making beautiful things from broken pieces. Rachel moved to him, fitting herself against his side. "We took something that started as violation and turned it into family. That's a kind of redemption." They stood together watching their son sleep, both knowing how easily this moment might never have happened. How many times they'd nearly lost each other, how many bullets and explosions and desperate decisions had stood between them and this peaceful night. "I need to tell you something," Luca said quietly. "The last of my illegal operations closed yesterday. The gambling network, the protection services, all of it. We're completely legitimate now. It took longer than I wanted, but you did it." Rachel turned to face him fully. "You actually did it. You transformed an entire organization. We transformed it. You showed me it was possible. You never let me make excuses or accept violence as inevitable." Luca cupped her face in his hands. "I spent years thinking the only way to honor my mother's memory was to be less brutal than my father. You taught me that real honor meant becoming something entirely different." "So what are we now? Respectable citizens? Boring suburbanites?" "We're a family. That's enough." Luca kissed her softly. "Though I reserve the right to be strategically interesting occasionally." Rachel laughed against his mouth. "I would expect nothing less." They moved downstairs, leaving Marcus's door cracked to hear if he woke. The kitchen was warm and familiar, evidence of the life they'd built visible in every corner. Rachel's veterinary journals on the counter, Luca's business plan spread across the table, Marcus's toys scattered across the floor in cheerful chaos. "Emily called earlier," Rachel said, pouring tea for both of them. "She wants to visit next weekend. Bring her new boyfriend to meet the family." "The accountant or the teacher?" "Neither. Apparently she's dating a firefighter now. Says she needed someone brave and a little dangerous after watching what we went through." Rachel settled onto the couch, Luca joining her. "I think we traumatized her with our life choices. Or inspired her to take risks of her own." Luca pulled Rachel close, both of them fitting together in the comfortable way of couples who'd survived impossible circumstances. "Your father seems to have adjusted well to having a former criminal as a son-in-law. He says you're growing on him, like a particularly persistent fungus." Rachel smiled at the memory of her father's grudging acceptance. "Though I think Marcus helped. Hard to resist being a grandfather, even when the father-in-law makes you nervous." They sat in comfortable silence, the kind that only comes from truly knowing another person. Rachel thought about how far they'd both come. From the wedding that never was to this quiet evening in a home they'd built together. From strangers thrown together by criminal conspiracy to partners who'd chosen each other freely despite every obstacle. "Do you ever regret it?" Luca asked, reading her thoughts the way he'd learned to do. "The life you gave up, the safety and predictability." "Never. Not once." Rachel's hand found his, their fingers interlacing automatically. "You gave me something better than safety. You gave me purpose, partnership, and a love I didn't know existed. That's worth every risk." "Even the bullets and explosions?" "Even those. Though I'm glad they're behind us now." Luca was quiet for a moment, his expression thoughtful. "I used to think love was a weakness, that caring about someone gave enemies leverage. Then you appeared in my life, and I realized love isn't a vulnerability, it's armor. It makes you stronger because you have something worth protecting." "Look at you, getting philosophical." Rachel kissed his jaw. "Marcus Aurelius would be proud." Marcus Aurelius never had to deal with Albanian crime lords and engineered pregnancies. "I think we've earned our philosophical moments." They stayed on the couch until exhaustion pulled them toward bed, both knowing Marcus would wake them early as he did every morning. The routine of parenthood had replaced the chaos of survival, and neither of them missed the adrenaline. As Rachel drifted towards sleep, Luca's arms around her and the baby monitor broadcasting Marcus's peaceful breathing, she thought about the journey that had brought them here, the wedding that exploded, the kidnapping that became protection, the pregnancy that started as a weapon and became a blessing, The violence that taught them both what they were willing to fight for. She wouldn't change any of it. Every impossible choice, every terrifying moment, every desperate decision had led to this family, this love, this life that felt more real than anything she'd known before. "I love you," she whispered to Luca in the darkness. "I love you too," he murmured back, his voice already heavy with sleep. "Thank you for crashing into my life and refusing to leave." "You're the one who crashed my wedding." "Semantics." Rachel smiled, settling deeper into his embrace. Outside, Boston settled into the quiet hours of night. Inside their home, a family slept peacefully. The veterinarian, the reformed criminal, and the baby who'd changed everything. They didn't choose the war that brought them together, but they'd chosen each other, chosen to build something good from impossible circumstances, chosen love over fear despite every reason to do otherwise. And that choice, made again and again through bullets and betrayals and desperate moments, had created something worth more than safety or predictability ever could have been. A family, a future, a love that outlasted the violence that tried to destroy it. In the nursery upstairs, Marcus stirred and settled back into sleep, dreaming baby dreams of a world his parents were fighting to make better. A world where love wasn't weakness, where redemption was possible, where even the most broken circumstances could create something beautiful. The story that began with gates exploding and engines roaring ended with quiet breathing and peaceful sleep, with a family who'd survived impossible odds and chosen each other freely on the other side. With a hard-earned truth neither would forget. They didn't choose the war, but they chose each other, and made a family that outlasted everything.